How Five Eyes intelligence agencies destroyed a working Bitcoin securities platform. Stick around for 15 minutes of music and announcements like this. Share it. Tag someone who needs to hear this. They gamified your attention and sold the news. This is algorithmic resistance, using their own technology to fight the technocracy.
They train the algorithm to keep us distracted, to make us click, to make us react, to keep us extracted. But I learned to see the pattern in the feed they design, the rage bait, the despair, the engineered blind. My grandfather reads Cohen, writes letters by hand, says truth was always buried, just different quicksand. He investigated Watergate with typewriter and phone. I investigate with TikTok from my bedroom alone. They gamified my attention. They bought the printing press. They sold my data, oh they sold the news. But we both see through the algorithmic lies they choose. This is algorithmic resistance. This is clicking past the feed. This is saving every screenshot. This is reading what they need us not to read. This is slowness in a system built for speed. Algorithmic resistance is the only thing we need. Empires fall from their own excess weight. Watch truth emerge like dawn, inevitable late. You're children of the algorithm, the feed, the scroll. You're learning what we learn, truth lives in patient souls. I taught myself to fact check everything I see. I taught myself to question who's selling me the story. They think we're just consuming, they thought we just comply. But patient investigation beats their algorithmic lie. They gamified my attention. They bought the printing press. They sold my data, oh they sold the news. But we both resist by searching for the truth they can't diffuse. This is algorithmic resistance. This is clicking past the feed. This is saving every screenshot. This is reading what they need us not to read. This is slowness in a system built for speed. Algorithmic resistance is the only thing we need. They want me scrolling past the truth in 15 seconds. They wanted me reading headlines, not the sources. I learned to click through, to archive, to save. I learned to dig through files, stuff over here to be brave. Different tools, same resistance, same grave. This is algorithmic resistance. This is clicking past the feed. This is saving every screenshot. This is reading what they need us not to read. This is slowness in a system built for speed. Algorithmic resistance. Thank you for teaching me to resist. Thank you for teaching me to timeless. Chew through, seeking a stank right.
Last week on the show, Operation Warp Speed 2.0, 4 massive policy frameworks dropped in 2 weeks, energy lockdowns, a federal voter database, a 291-page AI bill, and Trump's cyber strategy. The entire technocratic control grid built while MAGA sleeps. If you missed it, go watch. Link in the show description. Gaza was leveled to make way for a technocratic state. Oracle, Palantir, Trump, and Kushner are positioning themselves to profit from the rubble. The surveillance apparatus gets a fresh playground, while the connected few cash in on destruction marketed as reconstruction. This is bless the unbroken will.
The throne of glass and wire, a kingdom born of cold desire, and crowned the silent code that came to rule ya. It watched the trembling of your breath, it priced your life, it mapped your death, a final betrayal dressed as something true. Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will. They promised order, promised peace, but every gift required a piece of who you were before their grid consumed you. Nation bartered for control, a ledger carved into your soul, a quiet doom disguised as forward future. Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will. Oh, the watchers rise in the circuitry. Oh, the warnings lost in the dawn. Oh, the people bow the halls where truth was sold, where human hands grew numb and cold, and efficiency became the faith they gave you. You'd never see the chains they built, but every sunrise dripped with guilt, a quiet empire shaping your behavior. Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will. They tokenize the land and sky. They tokenize the land and sky. The right to live, the right to die. The right to live, the right to die. A sovereign life reduced to capture measure. The future shrank to narrow lines, a cage of data, coded signs, a subtle death they dressed in borrowed pleasure. Bless the unbroken will. Rise though the night is closing in. Rise though the stars are dimmed and still. Rise though the crown is forged of sin. Bless the unbroken will. So keep your lantern in the storm. Guard every soul that still feels warm, and hold the truth no tyrant's code can alter. For even at the world's last hour, a single heart can break the tower. A whispered vow the darkness cannot falter. Bless the unbroken will, bless the unbroken will.
2 weeks ago, we released Ohio Captured, exposing how technocrats seized every level of Ohio's government. Jobs Ohio controls billions with zero transparency, $2.5 billion in data center tax breaks for just 356 jobs. The intelligence line runs from Max Fisher to Wexner, to Epstein, to Thiel, to Vance. And this is the blueprint they're rolling out in all 50 states. 3 things coming up. May 21st through 25th, Libertarian National Convention in Grand Rapids, Michigan. May 24th, Enemies of the State, a live event with Ammon Bundy, Afroman, and speakers for crypto prisoners still behind bars. I'm running for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire, day2026.com, using that race to pressure Trump on pardons. Same leverage that freed Ross. May 25th, Rage Against the War Machine, also in Grand Rapids. 6 a.m. tanks through the front door for a radio host who said the word Bitcoin. Ian Freeman, Roger Ver, Roman Storm, Keon Rodriguez, still locked up. This is 6 a.m. in Keene. And this is what happens when you dare to speak truth about financial freedom in America.
In the morning, Leverett Street, rifles in the hall, tank through the front door for a radio host in Keene. He fed the meters, saved the town, Robin Hood of Keene. 20 years behind the microphone, first voice to say the word Bitcoin. Build a church in New Hampshire, an orphanage in Uganda. Forbes call his town a crypto mecca. They call him a criminal. They sent an undercover fake who said he dealt in heroin. Ian said no, turned him away. The Fed bought it anyway and called it evidence. Tanks at dawn, but the signal doesn't stop. And called it evidence. Send your tanks at dawn, but the signal doesn't stop. The judge threw out the laundering. Not enough evidence. 96 months anyway. The laws written before Bitcoin existed. Keon Rodriguez, Christmas Eve. William Hill, 4 years. Roman Storm, retrial in the fall. Ray Youssef, $200. Sterlingoff, 12 years. Roger Ver, 50 million in a gag order. The war on crypto didn't end. It just changed presidents. Mr. President, you set Ross free. You said you'd end the war. Ian's been inside since 23. Bonnie says he teaches inmates how to read. She says Bitcoin is sacred to us. You freed one. Now free them all! What you do with your freedom is your business. 6 a.m. in Keene. The signal can't be stopped. The signal can't be stopped. The signal can't be stopped.
That's the pre-show. The Aaron Day Show starts now. All right, welcome back to the Aaron Day Show. This is season 3, episode 13. We have an incredibly important interview tonight, an episode. I actually am going to do a little bit at the very beginning to talk about a big update to Technocracy Atlas, and then that's actually going to bleed into our episode tonight, which is quite a story, a fascinating story that is unfortunately too common. As we know, if you just saw the Free Ian music video, we have several of our crypto prisoners that are in prison or awaiting prison sentences or potentially being retried, as in the case with Roman Storm today, who had a hearing. But today we're going to be talking about an entrepreneur named Chris Horlocker, and I'm not going to give you his whole bio now, but this is a guy who, basically his story sounds like a James Bond story, James Bond book or novel. It's just incredible what's happened, the deep state attack, and his area of expertise is something that I happen to be incredibly passionate about. He was one of the earliest people to start talking about tokenizing equities, so stocks and bonds and financial instruments, and actually created a solution to do this that allowed what are called atomic swaps. So we'll get into all the details on this, but the stock market, as we've discussed many times on this show, that has many intermediaries. You do not own stocks in publicly traded companies. You don't own ETFs. There are layers and layers of intermediaries, and he created a system to get rid of those intermediaries. And he was destroyed by the equivalent of the CIA in Canada, literally run out of Canada. Several aspects. Like I said, it's a Bond story here, but he is currently suing the Canadian equivalent of the CIA in Canada for $140 million. So what I want to try to do tonight is lay out his story, even though there are some complexities to it. I want to lay out the story and with him and see what we can do to help elevate his story and package this up in a way with sound bites and so on and so forth, where we can start spreading this around to help him get momentum in his lawsuit, because that lawsuit will have huge implications well beyond Canada. But before we get into that, I want to talk about something that I deployed this week to Technocracy Atlas, and it actually stemmed from last week's episode. You may recall Craig and I went through and talked about the technocratic state of Ohio. And frankly, I think we were both shocked as we both prepared for the episode. I mean, Craig even lives in Ohio, so he's lived this for a long time. But it's stunning, the amount of surveillance, the data centers, the overlap of data centers with Jeffrey Epstein and Les Wexner. I mean, literally, Ohio is a major focal point for technocracy. And so I put out a tweet. I've been putting out, after we do a podcast every day, I'm trying to post essentially one of the slides with a description of the slide as one post, and then a video clip. which will hopefully be a viral video clip, but you know, an impactful video clip. We did 5 hours last week, so I was able to find at least 7 of them. And I put out the one on Ohio, and it went viral, had well over 100,000 views, but more than the views, and this is the really important part, is people started commenting and sharing information back and forth. We had a gubernatorial candidate from Ohio in the discussion comments. We had a state rep. We actually had Palmer Luckey, who is the CEO of Anduril, which is one of the companies that we focused on. And so what I learned from that, and what, you know, you probably have gathered as well, there's a huge backlash right now across the country around data centers, but data centers are just one part of it. And so what I've done is I've created an entire index of a technocracy score by state and state rankings. And I'm going to go through the website with you in a minute and explain what the methodology is. But to rank the states and to allow people to drill in and see what's going on around 7 different dimensions, and then ultimately to be able to comment on the Technocracy Atlas site. I'm going to bring a community around that. And you can actually sign up for free, you know, submit your email and get a detailed report, a PDF, with a full background on what's going on in your state, along with links to the relevant politicians or groups in the state, if you're going to go the political side. But of course, you know, what I'm recommending is that people start exiting the system. That's what I've always recommended. But I figured we'd do both so that, you know, hey, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Some of these people are having some success pushing these things back. So I want to help empower people on that front. But even if they're unsuccessful, it gets them down the pathway to realizing that the only way out is to exit the system. So I see this as a huge tool. So every day for the next 50 days or 45 now, or 48, there's going to be a new post that shows the ranking and some of the key shocking points for each of the 50 states. And I'm tagging some key influencers and people in each of those states that I think would be interested, in the hopes that this spurs a conversation in all of those states, and that gets people going to the Technocracy Atlas site and gets people around the country talking about this issue. Because as I've said time and time again, the big issue that we have in front of us is educating people about technocracy. If you don't understand what technocracy is, the world won't make sense at all. You'll just view things like COVID and some of these other, you know, staged events or whatever as one-offs, or where it's, you know, a handful of bad actors. But once you really understand technocracy, you realize this is a 90+ year plan to completely shape society and effectively strip us of our free will. So I'm excited about this site, and I'm excited about the fact that the site has quite a bit of traction. The other thing about all of this, and this actually is where it ties into our guest tonight, is who will be joining probably around 6:45 or so. But one of the big takeaways that that came out of the podcast last week is that there are multiple layers to technocracy, but in essence, it's technocratic firms, it's individuals, it's people like Peter Thiel, Larry Ellison, and others that are using and manipulating government at all levels to push their technocratic agenda. I've heard a lot of people recently talk about we're moving towards a multipolar world. And so people are starting to talk about things like, oh, we're going to have China, and then maybe we're going to have, you know, 3 or 4 different areas of concentration. And I think we may be moving towards a multipolar world, but it's not based on nation states. It's based on corporations. You're going to have Palantir, you're going to have Oracle, you're going to have Microsoft, you're going to have different countries vying for control over the global technocracy, because this is what we have going on today. When you dig into these individual companies, when you dig into Oracle or Palantir, I think, and this was really revealed when I studied Operation Stargate, which was the first big announcement of Trump's second term, this big, you know, investment announcement. It was a $500 billion deal that he presented as being critical to securing American dominance in AI. And then you look at the deal and it's like, okay, well, first of all, The lead investor is SoftBank from Japan. The companies involved are Oracle. Oracle is heavily involved globally. I mean, not only do they run the Federal Reserve System here, their first client was the CIA, but they're embedded in countries all around the world, including China. They do a massive amount of business in China. The same is true with OpenAI. So when Trump or a politician tries to tell you that a multinational corporation that has clients and is pushing surveillance technology in dozens of countries is, it's an investment on the basis of national interest, that's just not true. These corporations are very good at using tax incentives. They're very good at influencing legislation to block out competition. A couple of episodes back, I discussed the new White House AI policy, and I also discussed the Blackburn bill coming out of the Senate with respect to AI. What they're pushing for nationally is a system where the Department of Energy has control over whether or not a new AI model can even be released. That is a go, no-go decision that, according to this bill, the Blackburn bill, is put into the hands of the Department of Energy. As to laws, they're stripping away, and there's been a lot of conversation about stripping away state laws. And in fact, that's true. In this bill, the Secretary of Commerce is given the authority to basically go after and sue any state that comes up with a law that is trying to encumber AI development. Well, who is our Secretary of Commerce? It's Howard Lutnick. I don't know if I just said Secretary of State, but it's Secretary of Commerce. It's Howard Lutnick. So Howard Lutnick will be vested the authority to shoot down state-based laws on AI. And then it gets worse. You then have the FTC is involved with running programs to ensure that there's no political bias. So essentially, these AI models will be examined, and people will have to go through some kind of training to make sure that the AI isn't biased, courtesy of the FTC. Other things in there is they strip away Section 230, which is what is used by online platforms to make them essentially a neutral publisher, a neutral platform as opposed to the publisher, so that they don't get sued. So in other words, this is what gives Twitter the ability to offer a platform where we can communicate, and Twitter is not held liable for what our views are and what we post. And they want to get rid of that through this bill. That addition was made by Lindsey Graham. And so you package all of this up, and then there's liability for the developers. So in the end, what you have is a situation where the big tech companies are the ones lobbying for this. This essentially puts any innovation on hold, because no startup can afford. The only people that can comply with this are the large tech companies. So that's how the technocratic firms are influencing things at the national level. But then you get down to the state level and you start looking at these data centers, and most of these data centers involve tax breaks at the state level. So these data centers that are being built, I'm a complete free market guy, and I'm pro AI. There's nothing free market or pro AI about AIs that can only exist if they meet the standards of the DOE, the Secretary of Commerce, and the FTC. That's not a free market AI. And it certainly isn't the case where now these data centers are going to be processing and providing the compute for these authoritarian models using crony tax credits and a whole variety of other mechanisms. And so this is not. So I'm making a different case than most people can make, and you can make a whole variety of other cases for why you don't want these to be implemented. Health concerns, water consumption. You can make all of those arguments. I'm actually making the argument from the perspective of someone who is interested in capitalism and free markets, that what is happening here is a technocratic takeover and not free markets. And so I'm trying to add another component to that. And so what I want to do is show you the site, and it's live now. I'm going to say that it's going to be in beta for 50 days as we work through the inevitable bugs and the inevitable issues that come about with the site. Because as always, I have to remind you, I'm creating these things myself. I'm doing all of the tech myself, and somehow I'm now managing 7 sites and a U.S. Senate campaign and a whole variety of other things. And so I'm stating up front, I do want your feedback, but I want to, and in fact, even on the methodology itself, which I have published a white paper that explains how I came up with the rankings. And so if I very well may have left something out, or there may be a better way to do it. So I'm always looking for input on how to make all of this better. But let me tell you what's in here and what the methodology is. So the methodology, and just to give you a little background, so the whole purpose of this, it's the first comprehensive state-by-state rating system that measures the degree to which technocratic governance structures have replaced or subverted democratic processes across the United States. And these are the 7 dimensions that I have in the weightings. And so again, these could be changed. And I used AI heavily to collect the data and actually think through and analyze all of this. And so, but what I found so far is, based on the feedback that I'm getting from people in each of the states as I'm putting out the reporting, is that it seems fairly accurate. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to be perfect, but it seems like a pretty good first start. So the 7 dimensions are, surveillance. So what is the status of surveillance in your state? Things like face recognition, AI fusion platforms, drones, body cam AI, various regulation gaps. What is the status of your state with respect to digital ID? Real ID compliance, mobile driver's licenses, state digital ID programs, biometric collection, and so forth. 3, what is the state of data centers and tech capture? I will be working on an additional element to this site, which is going to be a map with a full breakdown of all of the data centers that exist currently and that are in the process of being built or going through the legislative process. Now, not all data centers are bad. So there's going to be, I'm going to get into the detail of, okay, what do these data centers do? What is the specific, because there are applications of data centers that aren't bad, but it turns out if it's about providing compute to one of these, federally controlled and manipulated databases, essentially it's a surveillance system. That's one way of looking at it. What is the state of political connections? One of the things I've been digging into, which is fascinating, is what Peter Thiel is up to as one dimension of this. Peter Thiel and Palantir and their presence. Certainly that's not the only lens, and I will expand that out, but it is my opinion that if anybody is playing 5D chess with technocracy, it's Peter Thiel. I don't agree with Peter Thiel, but I will admit that he is smart, he's effective, and he actually thinks things through long in advance. I've been following some of his political stuff for a long time, and it turns out he's making investments in more than just J.D. Vance or the U.S. Senate race in Arizona, which people know about. He has been placing bets at the state level. I even found in my own state of New Hampshire that he contributed $10,000 to the New Hampshire GOP. So I think what's going to be interesting is to find, working with all of you as we kind of crowdsource information on this, what is the influence that's being had at the state legislative level? What is the influence that's going on even at the local level? Because at the local level, it's often town councils, depending upon the structure of your government. That's where, the developers in a particular town usually own and bankroll the town council. So there's a way, I'm going to use some of the skills that I acquired working for a decade in New Hampshire on political stuff. I'm going to try to share that knowledge and try to crowdsource different town and state political contributions. Number 5, what's the state of public-private partnerships? What's the financial architecture of the state? And what are the civil liberties protections, if any? And so those all go into a score. And so then you can go to state map and you can see, hold on, let me see what's going on here. All right. You can see here's the state map. It's color coded. You can see which states are ranked in which order, and you can click on your individual state. So, clicking on Ohio, and then that will give you kind of a summary snapshot of how your state ranks and what the overall score is, along with the key bullet point facts, a tweet that you can copy and share, maybe to get the story going within your community. So, for instance, in Ohio gave Amazon $2.5 billion in taxpayer subsidies for data centers that create 20 to 200 jobs each, while Peter Thiel bought J.D. Vance's Senate seat for $13.5 million. Again, each state has their own teaser like this. And then if you submit your email address, I will send you a link to a website as well as a PDF that you can download with the full report for your state. Part of the reason I want the email address is a couple things. One, I'm going to send out notices, probably updates at least monthly, but then maybe more frequently if there's some kind of emergency going on. So I want to be able to communicate with everyone and be able to send out updates on a regular basis. The other is, I will tell you that I very much have the feeling, it feels a lot like 2020 with some of the stuff that is going on with social media and censorship once again. And I felt it in March of 2020, and I even did a series of 14 videos, the purpose of which was to teach people to get off of centralized tech for everything from, use library instead of YouTube, use Jitsi instead of Zoom, use cryptocurrency, decentralized cryptocurrencies, use Signal, so on and so forth, because I sensed that the censorship was coming before it did. But I mean, not too much before it did, because I had Facebook pages and groups that totaled over 200,000 followers. And by the end of day 5, my reach was capped at 50. So I have that same feeling again. And, we're already starting to see things like Bitcoin.com, which has had a very popular YouTube channel for a decade and is one of the most, popular crypto wallets out there. They were removed from YouTube, and they were given some flag that's something like they're unsafe and they're dangerous or something along those lines. They've never had a strike. And so this feels a lot like websites that were just getting shut down related to COVID, that were providing information that, at the time you would have looked at the getting the channel banned as, well, this doesn't make sense. Well, it made a lot of sense 90 days later, when you saw that we were fully moving into lockdown mode and that there were vaccines on the horizon. And so it makes me wonder, something like Bitcoin.com, what might be in store next. But you're also seeing things like there's a bot purge on X, which is good. I mean, the bots aren't great, but then we're seeing things like implementing a facial recognition system for people that want to have their accounts unbanned. And so we already have a heavy level of screening. And as I've said time and time again, X was designed, well, not as I've said, as Elon Musk said in a video clip that I played, X was designed to replace the WeChat, which is the heart of the social credit system in China. And that's exactly where it's going. So now we're talking about facial recognition, biometrics, algorithms that define freedom of reach, so on and so forth. So you can provide, again, your email, and I'll send you the report, which I encourage you to share. And then the next thing I'm going to add to this is a discussion section, because I want this to be a place for people to be able to organize and share additional information. But I'm excited about the traction so far. I just did another interview this afternoon. And this topic came up, and so people have been reading this and talking about it. And so I did an interview with Sarah Westall, which I think will be out. It may even be out during this podcast. I think that happened once last time, but we discussed this. So people are passionate about this, and so I encourage you to check it out. Technocracyatlas.com. Go to the state map section. So I see that Chris has hopped in, so I'm going to have him pop in. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Hey, Aaron, I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been doing interviews. Hopefully all of my AV is set up. I've got some new things here I haven't used.
I can hear you fine. And oops. Sorry, I knocked you off accidentally. I can hear you fine. Everything looks great on my end.
Fantastic. I see you've got a lovely AI generated photo of me in a past age, looking at the beard.
Yeah, I know from talking
lack
to you.
Thereof.
Yeah, I know talking to you earlier. I know this isn't your look now, but in any event, I thought we'd go.
It's good. I'm looking very polished, very corporate boardroom.
Yep, exactly. So, just before we jump into this, I wanted to say that, my audience is fairly used to, and by the way, if you're watching this, please like and share. This is my traffic is getting a bit shadow banned. We should have higher numbers than this by this point. So something's happened. I don't know how the algorithm works, but please like and share this. This is incredibly important information to get out. And like a lot of these cases, so I talk about technocracy as the main focal point of this podcast, but I also talk about exiting the system, getting out of all of these systems using, privacy coins, cryptocurrency, tokenization, private tokenization outside of the system. And then unfortunately, I've had to spend quite a bit of time talking about crypto prisoners of war, which started with Ian Freeman back in 2023, and unfortunately has continued to expand to include Roger Ver and Roman Storm and many, many others. And so this audience, my normal audience, is fairly familiar with a lot of these concepts in a general sense. But one of the things I wanted to try to do with this is because I know even when you look at these court cases, like Roman Storm, who had his hearing today as to whether they're going to retry him on some of the charges where there was no definitive conclusion the first time around. When you look at these court cases, oftentimes what happens is the jury has no idea what's going on, and they don't understand the technical concepts. And so they see the Department of Justice there with 5 lawyers in suits, and they see them showing all of these diagrams and everything else, and their eyes glaze over. And in the end, it's just kind of like, either out of a combination of fatigue or it's just, they baffled them with bullshit is another way to describe it. Oftentimes these people find themselves convicted because the concepts are difficult to understand for a general audience. So what I'm hoping we can do tonight, and the reason I put some of these slides together, is I'm planning on making a lot of clips out of this. And so that hopefully we can get some short clips out that hopefully one or more will go viral, and then push people to the full interview, because the whole story needs to be understood. And there are ramifications. Chris's story has incredible ramifications for the entire world, and for our ability to engage in voluntary trade outside of a technocratic prison system. So this is really that important. Fortunately, Chris isn't a prisoner. So this is a rare case where I can actually talk to the person directly and they're not facing immediate incarceration. Not that you haven't had your fair share of challenges, but Chris is actually suing the equivalent of Canada's version of the CIA for $140 million. So, and my understanding is that this case is moving forward. So this is huge. This is something that never happens. And my guess is we're going to find that the deep state actors probably move into the entire Five Eyes. We're probably, this probably digs into the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, in addition to Canada. So this is really important. I urge you to listen to this. If you have comments along the way, certainly put them in. But my goal here is, to the best I can, to help try to get this story out in a way that people can understand. And I'll just do a brief background on Chris. Before he was 30, Chris Horlacher was CFO of Peter Schiff's brokerage firm, managing billions. And so he saw how the securities industry works from the inside and then tried to fix it. So he has an incredible background to be able to do this, by the way. He was a CPA from Deloitte, where he was involved with auditing Fortune 500 companies. As I said, CFO of Euro Pacific Canada, which is Peter Schiff's brokerage. Mises Institute board member, and Austrian economics author. I mean, how aligned could that be? And then he learned about Bitcoin in 2010. So he was one of Canada's earliest adopters, even earlier than me, which is great. So this guy is an absolute OG. So with that, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And thanks for that great introduction.
Absolutely. One thing, I mean, before we get into this, I want to just refresh. I've talked about this a lot, the great taking. And essentially, you know, the idea and what I've been trying to explain to people is that you already don't own your stocks and you don't actually have them in your physical possession. And most people don't know how this works. Would you mind explaining to people, you know, how kind of Seed and Co, how this whole high level system works and kind of the scam behind how securities work?
Yeah. And you said something, you used an old saying called, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. And the world of finance and economics loves jargon. And they use jargon to conceal how they operate and the fact that what they're doing is not actually particularly unique or difficult. It was one of the many things I've learned working in this industry. But essentially the same model of central banking and money creation exists in the world of securities. They just call them different things. So instead of, instead of like a Forex market, you have a stock market. Instead of banks, you have brokerages. Instead of clearinghouses, you have transfer agents. And instead of central banks, you have central depositories. And the depositories are the ultimate legal owner. This is where your company like Seed and Co comes from. They are the registered owner of over 90%, I would say, of all the publicly traded securities in the country. And this is done basically by law from a system that was set up in the 1980s. We had this problem called the paper blizzard in the 1970s, where Wall Street, Bay Street, the securities market or the securities industry is just choking on its own output. They literally cannot take all of these traded securities, cancel and reissue them under the new owners. That was the old model. And when you have your name on a stock certificate, that's called direct registration. In the 1980s, they couldn't maintain this system with couriers and basically just couriers biking backpacks full of paper all over downtown New York or Bay Street in Canada or Vancouver. So to fix the mess, they decided, well, we're just going to have one single owner of all of the securities, and then we're going to have credits or beneficial interests in these. And that the account that you have at your broker is a lot like the account that you have at your bank. You have the cash, and the cash is like the stock certificate. You give that to your banker, and it's not yours anymore. The bank is going to take that. They're going to lend it out, whatever they do with it to make a fat spread. And you, in return, just get a credit on the bank's balance sheet that you call a bank account, but the bank calls it a liability. And we trade around these liabilities of banks as if they were cash, which incidentally is also the liability of a bank. It's the liability of the central bank, the Federal Reserve, or the Bank of Canada, or the ECB, or whatever you have in your area. And so this system was transplanted into the securities market around that time, and we've kind of hobbled along ever since. But there are some obvious problems to this, particularly when one of the major institutions goes bankrupt, like a Lehman Brothers or an MF Global, and you have a problem because whenever somebody goes bust, you have 3 days of executed trades that are still up in the air that you haven't settled. And now one of the counterparties is gone or the person who is supposed to be processing the settlement is gone. So how do we, somebody's got to sweep in, figure out where all of this stuff is supposed to go, and then hopefully get it right. And that takes lawyers and accountants and all of those all big legal process. So it's a mess. We saw that 2011 Lehman Brothers, terrible time to be a client MF Global, terrible time to be a client of John Corzine. And but this is what we have, folks. It's the same system. And so just like the banks are lending out your cash and it's being lent out to multiple people, the brokers are doing the same thing, only they don't call it debt. They just call it rehypothecation or hypothecation. And so this is especially true if you own securities in a margin account, because of course, I think we all know, or ought to know, that all of the securities in a margin account is the collateral on that margin loan. And so, yeah, it's technically the brokers, it's the broker's securities at this point. They're going to lend them out to other people who want to short sell or do whatever you need to borrow a security for. And so it introduces a lot of transactions into the system that otherwise actually wouldn't happen. Finance is very boring, folks. If we got rid of most of the problems with money, a lot of what you see in the marketplace is not going to happen, because so much of it is people trying to stay ahead of the debasement of the currency. So you get back to more, I guess, traditional vehicles of saving, and actually, like, whole insurance was super popular way back in the day, because not only did you have something that functioned a lot like a savings account, but you had insurance coverage that came along with it, and you could borrow against the built up value of your insurance policy. These days, though, people call that infinite banking, and I don't know why. But it is what it is. Whole life insurance, folks, check it out. It works. It's worked for 100 years. A lot of wealthy families still use it because it works. They do what works. They've survived this long because what they do works. But back to this system, I spent a lot of time hands-on with it at Euro Pacific, and it's called in the world of brokerages, it's called the back offense, or the post-trade cycle. And a lot of people's attention spans end at the exchanges and the brokerages, and they don't open the hood and look into what is happening after the exchange has executed your trade. And what happens is all of these executed orders are batched together and sent off to another company called a transfer agent. And just like a clearinghouse, the transfer agents are looking at all of these movements of securities from one account into another account, and it's netting everything and then coming up with the net settlement. And then that is sent to the depository, who then updates the beneficial owners of each of these groups of securities. And so you have this daisy chain sandwich of risk, and if any part of it collapses, it's big trouble. For that reason, a lot of depositories are actually the government. They're a crown corporation. They're a federally registered corporation. They're like the Federal Reserve, and they operate with a government monopoly. That is not the case in Canada or the United States. They write some regulations, and then you can, if you fit into that operating model, then you can, and you can pay for the right licenses, then you get to start a depository. But your job's not done there. You still need to go to the exchanges and say, please allow me to act as a custodian or as a depository. And so if you look up, if you go to like the New York Stock Exchange, or you go to NASDAQ or the TMX, and you look up, you can just search for the list of authorized depositories. And this is important if you're an issuer, because that's who you deliver what's called a master certificate to. So a master certificate, say I'm say I'm Google or Apple or whatever, and I want to issue 1 billion shares. I'm not going to break that billion up piecemeal and write out, thousands or tens of thousands or millions of share certificates. I write one single certificate for 1 billion shares in the name of Seed and Company. And then that gets shipped off to the depository, and it kind of just sits there in a warehouse forever. Super exciting stuff, guys. And that's how this works. And then the next layer I mentioned were the transfer agents. And the transfer agents, they're the clearinghouses, the bookkeepers. From the issuer's side, if I want to do an earnings distribution, again, I don't know who to mail the checks to. All I know, my only shareholder is Seed and Company, as far as I know. So I write a big fat check for the total amount of the distribution to the transfer agent, who then parcels it out and mails out the individual checks, or does the bank transfers to the ultimate beneficial owners. And so we have a system fraught with risk. Eliminating counterparty risk, especially after the collapse of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, was a very, very big focus. That changed the way we audited companies, and we implemented lots of new policies and procedures. And now evaluating counterparty risk became a part of this. So if I was a company and I had a hedging portfolio full of interest rate swaps or currency futures or something, then previous to the 2008 collapse, we would not necessarily look at this. But now we started to, because now counterparty risk was the name of the game. And so you had to look at all of the underwriters of those swaps. Who was going to pay out if these things went into the green? And are they capable? Are they liquid? Or are these guys just going to evaporate the moment you call them up and say, oh, we're activating our swap now, and you have to start paying us instead of us paying you? And if they're the kind of organization that's just going to vanish into nothing as soon as that starts happening to any respectable degree, it's like redemptions on a Ponzi scheme. At this point, it will cause it to instantaneously collapse. And so actually your $1 billion hedging portfolio, sir, is not worth $1 billion because the people underwriting it don't even have $1 billion. So we really started examining that, and it got to the point for me where it just looked like a mess. And it's this big giant mess, lots of problems, just trying to just limp its way forward. And then Bitcoin came along, and it landed on my radar right after it started gaining some monetary value. And that was about mid-2010, right after the Bitcoin pizza. I still celebrate Bitcoin Pizza Day. It was the day I found out about Bitcoin, the day my life changed, for better or for worse. We're still figuring that part out. But
we all are.
Yeah. And almost instantly, because I was already up to my eyeballs in the securities industry, and I realized instantaneously, well, whoa, this blockchain thing, if it can do money, it can do all intangible assets. And that was really the key application of the tech for me, was in intangible assets. A lot of people are using it for real estate now, real estate titles, car titles. Cool, great. But you still have a reconciliation that needs to be done with the real world. And you can't use that system to enforce your property rights. If government comes along and says, we're taking your house, sorry, get the fuck out. That's that. And you can wave your blockchain and your private keys or your wallet in their face as long as you want, but they're still going to take your house. So the intangible asset application was a big deal for me, and knowing that the securities industry was as big as it was, it's an order of magnitude larger than the money markets. And we haven't even considered the unlisted companies yet. So worldwide, on all public stock exchanges, about 10,000 companies. There's hundreds of thousands of companies trading over the counter. And that was really where I really wanted to introduce this system, because of a lot of people tend to perceive, again, things just from what they know. Most people don't know a depository or transfer agent. They've never dealt with one. And so they assume I was rolling out something like what they did know, which was an exchange. And so a lot of regulators would come to me and ask me about the exchange or my platform. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? We're software developers. We're not a financial institution. We don't match orders. We don't execute anything. We don't hold anybody else's assets. We write code. End of story. That's all we do. But the regulators didn't want to hear that, because of course they can't tell me how to run my business if all my business is writing code. So that was sort of the beginning, I think, of our hot and cold relationship.
Yeah, so I just want to say a couple things. Well, yeah, but before we move into this too much further, it's my understanding that the CEO of Seed and Company is ex-CIA. Is that true to your knowledge?
I don't know personally who that is, but I would not be surprised. The financial industry is infested with intel agents, informants, officers, and just your run-of-the-mill communists, because communists love other people's money, and that's where you go to get other people's money.
That they do. And so so we've talked about the great taking on the show, and the fact that in the U.S. all 50 states have made changes to their UCC laws that make it so that next time there's a collapse, which there's likely to be, possibly imminently, everything that Chris was talking about. I mean, if your broker goes under, they've made it actually easier for secured creditors to end up with the economic ownership in the investments that you think that you own, with a particular preference for larger banks and kind of too big to fail banks. So this is
right, because the big brokerages and the big banks are typically the ones that actually provide the margin. And so they will do that with the secure in the knowledge that that broker's entire book of assets is on the chopping block just to satisfy them before any account holder.
Yep. So this is important to know. So I often say on the show, I'm glad you're on here to explain it in more detail, but I'm like, you don't own the money in your bank account. You don't own, chances are you don't own these financial instruments. Again, 10% of the time you might, but usually they're through these multiple third parties. And now I'm curious, before we move in, so I got involved with a blockchain called Ravencoin in, I think, late 2018, 2019. Where are you with what you were doing in terms of timeline?
Well, the project's dead. We have no funding. We have no employees. It's just me and the lawyers prosecuting the case. I think probably if I actually tried to start up the project again, I would be attacked relentlessly because of the panic that I am seeing from the other side of this lawsuit. The tactics that they've employed have been absolutely shameful and just downright illegal. Some of the things they're doing will land them in jail under criminal sentences for life in prison. Some of the things that they've done. So I guess the incentive to stop me from doing anything at all, apparently, is very high in the halls of the Canadian government within the Five Eyes community. And I mean, I don't necessarily know why, because I mean, if they can handle Bitcoin, I'm sure they could handle the Equibit system. So yeah, I think surveillance wise, I don't think the Equibit system necessarily threatened what they were doing, because it's a fully open, transparent system, and you don't need to recruit brokers and exchanges to tell you what's happening in the marketplace. You could just go look yourself, and anybody else can. So it really kind of epitomized the stated virtues of these financial regulators, but what about the unstated virtues? And that's where you have to start thinking, well, and this is where the great taking comes in, and you have these entrenched big players in the industry that don't ever want to take a loss. It's the whole reason why they pushed to have a central bank as that lender of last resort, meaning bailouts. And it was never there for anything other than bailouts.
Yeah. So when I got involved with Ravencoin, the idea behind Ravencoin was, and actually I sent a text right now to Bruce Fenton, who was one of the co-founders of that blockchain. It was a fork of Bitcoin, but he was working with Patrick Byrne, and Patrick Byrne had started a company called T0. And Patrick Byrne's whole idea was, hey, we have all this naked short selling going on in the market, and Wall Street doesn't want transparency because there's a whole bunch of, shenanigans going on behind the scenes. So the original idea was, hey, let's take, it sounds like you already had the idea, but take, Bitcoin transparency and a blockchain that doesn't require third parties, and let's apply it to a whole variety to everything, not just, securities, but he actually created a keiretsu of companies that were working on everything from, supply chain for agriculture. He created something called the blockchain tech stack for human civilization. His idea was you could apply this to voting. You could apply it to capital markets, land registration. Anything could be tokenized. And Ravencoin was positioned to be the blockchain for that. It was an open source project, no corporate structure, so on and so forth. And I'm interested in the parallels between your stories because I had, if you go back to season 1, episode 4 of the Aaron Day Show, I did an interview with Steven Nerioff, who was arrested in the middle of the night by 11 FBI agents and was, threatened and told that if he didn't basically turn over information or give dirt on a laundry list of people, including Roger Ver and Patrick Byrne and Bruce Fenton, that he'd never see his kids again. And so he's currently suing the U.S. government for just a massive amount of money. They ended up dropping the charges. But one of the things that they were really trying to pressure him on was that his claim anyway was that he created the legal structure behind the security token model, as opposed to an ICO actually doing a legitimate STO. And he claims to have created the legal structure behind that, and claims that they were trying to take down Patrick Byrne. And this was in 2019 as part of this whole thing. And so I bring this up because I think it might be interesting to compare notes if we're looking at this from the perspective of kind of the Five Eyes more broadly. It seems very clear that any effort to get involved with the trading of securities in a way that is truly peer-to-peer, that gets rid of these third parties, there has been massive effort to stop that. And in the
even
US,
more aggressive, reckless, and just in-your-face criminal than anything that ever came out of the banking industry against Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies. I was really shocked by just the absolute brazenness of the regulator, and I have them on tape. We were the first ICO of Canada, the Equibit Group ICO. If you ask the Ontario Securities Commissions, they're going to say it was this other company, but that was just one company that went to them ahead of time and said, "Oh, please." They tried to they did it like an IPO, and they went and they got a pre-approval, and they jumped through a whole bunch of regulatory hoops. But what I was doing was what I consider a true ICO. We were pre-mining a mineable open source blockchain. So these used to be called pre-mine sales. That's a true ICO, at least in my opinion. Others don't necessarily agree, but it is what it is. But that's what we were doing. And as far as I was concerned, or as far as any of the other security lawyers in the world were concerned, this was a software pre-sale. And software pre-sales are a thing that have existed Lots of software projects get funded with pre-sales, so you just get the first release of the software. You get it early, or you get it you get it at a discount. So you paid $50 in the pre-sale for a piece of software that is going to retail for $80. There's things like that. No securities regulator ever stepped in to any of these things. No securities regulator ever stepped in to stop a condo pre-sale either. But again, this is the same thing. You're paying for me to build a property for you, and whether that's real property or digital property, at least legally, philosophically, shouldn't matter. But that was not the agenda. The agenda was, we're going to use securities regulators to stop all development of this technology. Anybody who tries to raise money for this technology, put an end to it, lickety split by any means necessary. And the whole OSC experience was just wacky. After I delivered the speech at an event in Toronto called Tech TO, I was speaking to a room of like 700-800 bankers and lawyers and accountants and people who worked in the financial industry. And I delivered a speech, and right afterwards, I was approached by a partner and an associate from a very big law firm in Canada called Davies, Ward, Phillips and Weinberg. They became the company's external counsel. And they liked what we were working on because, of course, they did a lot of securities transactions. They're the people creating all of that paperwork, and they freaking hated it. They wanted me to finish this system so that they could then introduce it to all of their clients. And they weren't the only law firm that wanted to start doing this, and big firms and asset managers. We had one asset manager who wanted to migrate their entire portfolio onto Equibit that was managing over $1 trillion. But so big money wanted to use this, and so naturally we had to be stopped. And but we set to work kind of analyzing the Equibit coin from a securities law standpoint, because we wanted to do a pre-sale. And they were pretty convinced that there was sorry, my okay, thank you. They were convinced. Sorry, might be my nanny. It's just telling me one of my kids has fallen asleep. But we wanted to do this. We wanted to do the pre-sale. We analyzed the shit out of it, and they concluded not a security. So that's that. No need for registration. No need for a prospectus. Anything like that. We went to the OSC in December 2016. We had a meeting with the leaders of a group in there called Launchpad, which turns out to be an entrapment scheme. Literally every company that went to this group in the OSC was ultimately destroyed. And we met with the head of Launchpad and their top legal person and presented the whole system to them, which by all accounts they loved. They said, this is cool. This is really interesting. Keep going. And I asked them, well, do you think the coin is a security? And they declined to comment. They just said, ask some lawyers. And okay, well, we've already been to the top law firm in the country. They say it's not a security. So it sounds like we've got our green light to proceed. And we did. And we opened up the pre-sale in February of 2017. And a couple of weeks into it, we get an email from the Ontario Securities Commission. Oh, we've received an anonymous tip that you might be engaged in the unregistered or the sale of unregistered securities, and we need to talk to you, or you blah, 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 blah. And you need to start answering all of our questions because we might begin an enforcement action against you. And so we start talking to them, and all of our audio recorders are running. And not only did we get them to admit they had not read anything in our terms and conditions, they hadn't read our white paper, they'd literally done no research on us at all before calling us and taking action. And they were pretending like we never even were at their offices like 2 months ago. And so they weren't, we got them to admit that. And then we got them to tell us, well, go ahead and finish your pre-sale, which we did, of course. And then a few months after that, they slapped us with an enforcement action for conducting the pre-sale. So, of course, we play their own words right back to them. And then that enforcement action immediately vanishes. And I guess at this point, the deep state realized, oh, well, we can't take this guy down via an entrapment scheme. So we're just going to destroy the company. And so as it turns out, one of my business partners was a CSIS officer. And I had known this man for years before I even started the Equibit project. We met in 2010, shortly after I had conceived of the idea. And I had mentioned it to him the very day we met. And I think maybe now this is why this guy stuck around, because he was always encouraging me to start software projects. And we did do one prior to Equibit, which didn't really go anywhere at all. And maybe that was by design. And I think he was just waiting for me to do the blockchain one, because whatever story or narrative that the Five Eyes were going to use me for and create and have me be the fall guy for some sort of crypto debacle, which is what they've been producing for the news cycle now for year after year after year after year. Every year there's 4 or 5 of these crypto debacles. And you look at them in any sort of scrutiny or you give them any sort of attention, and it's very obvious that these are all deep state cons. Like the implosion of FTX was obviously planned in advance, but it's thrown around the news cycle like, oh, look at these terrible unregulated exchanges, and we're going to listen to Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, who was selling FTX stock and bragging about all the due diligence he did on this company. Is he going to jail? No. Has he even been charged? Is there an investigation going on? Like, he had to know that this was fake, that they had just unloaded everything off into a special purpose vehicle and had some meth head woman trading it down to zero, basically. So that's what they wanted the public to see the crypto industry as. They don't want it to look like it's being spearheaded and led by people who think reasonably and conscientiously about these issues and really care about the end product and who's going to use it and what kinds of problems they're going to solve in society. Those aren't the goals. The goals are pump and dumps for black ops and libel and pillory the people who are in that industry trying to do real stuff. And I wasn't going to have any of that. So phase 2 of this officer's plan, I guess, was just to destroy the company. And so one of the lead developer for the core disappears from the company. He goes AWOL for a couple of weeks and then comes back with this fantastical story about being hounded by CSIS, who then appears to have threatened his naturalization process because he was a Russian who had been living and working in Canada for the last 10 years and was about to get his citizenship, and he didn't want that getting messed up. And so, of course, I think CSIS knew exactly what button to push to flip this guy over to their side, which seems to be exactly what happened. And they recruited him. They made him go to Russia to divest himself of a company he had started with some old friends of his back there. And why would you do that? That you wouldn't. A Canadian citizen can own shares of a Russian company. That's not a big deal. But a Canadian spy spying on Russia ought not to own shares of Russian companies. So this is an independent security clearance thing that they made that guy do. And so he's undoubtedly working for CSIS in one capacity or another now. But what they had him do was basically smash to bits the communications system that was pivotal to our system. One of the major breakthroughs we did was being able to do a cross-chain atomic swap right out of the wallet. It was literally like you would use the communication system to broadcast an order, and all the network nodes would hear this, and anyone that wanted to respond would then open up a secure communications channel with you. You would exchange hashes and keys and everything you need to do to complete the swap, and click, click, done. And we demoed that, and within months the company was destroyed, because at that moment we proved to every custodian and transfer agent in the world that their goose was cooked, that we had succeeded in what we had set out to build, and that there was absolutely no way they would be able to pivot and compete against it. You're selling horses and buggy whips at this point, Mr. DTCC and Computer Share. And I'm Mr. Ford, and I'm just going to flood the market with Model Ts and drive you out of business.
Yeah, no, this is a really big deal, and I try to explain this to people. Are you familiar with a project called Zano?
I don't think so. No.
So I started with Ravencoin, and I was intrigued by the idea of being able to tokenize any asset, securities being one application. And by the way, one of the things that tokenization makes possible is, you talk about large public companies or even over the counter, but there's a really big opportunity for startups. I mean, at this point, one of the things I've been saying to people for a long time is the SEC is not here to protect investors. The SEC is here to protect incumbents. They create a massive barrier that makes it very expensive. And if you're starting a company and you're a first-time entrepreneur and you have to spend $30,000 to $50,000 on legal fees just to be able to raise money, and then you can only raise money from people that have a high net worth, that's a horrible situation in terms of stunting entrepreneurial growth. And they want it that way. I mean, so these technologies threaten that in a massive way. And it's not to say it won't be abused, but they're not protecting the abuse. They're trying to protect themselves. And so this is a big deal. What he's talking about here with atomic swaps is the ability to settle and trade these securities without a third party. So what Zano is one of the lead developers behind Zano created CryptoNote, which is the technology behind Monero. He was one of the main developers of Monero. So you can create privacy tokens. And then they've created something called ionic swaps, where you can create tokens, and then you can swap wallet to wallet privacy tokens without third parties. But it sounds like, what you were doing was way ahead. Like, this is pioneering critically important stuff for the ability to be able to engage in trade without third parties.
Yeah. We had a very, very razor sharp focus, and I think because I understood the entire edifice of the securities industry, I knew exactly what functions were performed by who, and not only that, but who I could disrupt while gaining the support and approbation of the larger securities industry. Because brokers and exchanges don't particularly like the depositories and transfer agents. They see them as kind of just like, it's just a sunk cost. You got to do it. There's nothing we can do about it. They can't be changed. We're just stuck with it. We hate it. It's slow. We're all beholden to their policies that have not changed in 40 years. And so, yeah. You're saying you saying you have a solution to all this? Fan-fucking-tastic, because this is costing us billions of dollars a year. And you mentioned investor protections and security regulation, and you're 100% bang on. Like, the securities regulators do not exist to protect investors. That is an absolute farce. And it has to be a farce, because The Ontario Securities Commission's sister agency is the Ontario Lottery. So here we have an agency saying, we're going to protect you, investors, and we're going to protect you by saying you're not accredited investors. All these rich assholes are accredited investors, and they get to invest their money in the most lucrative and productive component of the economy, startups. So no, you don't get to invest in startups, which have historically a 1 in 10 chance of succeeding, by the way. So you don't get a 1 in 10 chance of making money. We're going to protect you by taking away that choice. And so if you want to do something, go to the lottery.
Yep.
Because the odds are so much better than 1 in 10, right? In the lottery.
Yeah.
But I brought up this very point on stage in a room full of people, including people I knew to be from the Ontario Securities Regulator. They had a table over in the corner. And I say this, and I'm like, they're not here to protect you, folks. We need to get rid of these guys, get rid of the accredited investor regulations. Like this is just some weird thing that the US did, and then Canadians decided to import it because every bad idea that ever came out of the United States was replicated enthusiastically by the Canadian government. But it doesn't exist in Europe or many other countries. This is why? And it's so that the richest and wealthiest people have this captive corner of the marketplace, which also happens to be the most profitable part of the market, all to themselves.
That's exactly right. You don't get to invest in it as the average guy until after the people that are in early have made 100x or 1,000x, and this is all done to protect you, right? You're essentially you're the exit liquidity.
Exactly. That's what IPOs are. Exit plans for the founders and the venture capitalists.
Yep. So
that's not the beginning. I mean, I've done venture capital, I've done startups. IPOing is the end for us. and then we're gone. Like, we've already taken the most lucrative and profitable time of this company for ourselves, and we're just bailing out and letting Bay Street and Main Street letting Main Street have the scraps that we're going to leave them after we've carved out the biggest bumps in profitability. We've all got our 100x or 1000x, and we're good.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, I mean, understand this is literally the way that it is structured. The only thing you're being protected from is generational wealth, and it's by design. But there's something about Chris's story that I think it's important for people to know, because this happens again and again. We talked about it with Ian Freeman, with Roger Ver, Roman Storm. In all of these situations, these aren't people that went out and flagrantly violated the law and said, hey, screw you, screw your laws. These are actually people that went to the trouble of employing, the best legal counsel around. And, a lot of the stuff may be murky, but there were opinion letters in all of these cases. Ian Freeman had an opinion letter stating he didn't need a money transmitter license.
We had a no action letter from the Swiss securities regulator saying Equibit is not a security. Come here, do your ICO. You don't have to register.
Yep. So the thing to understand here is, and yet even still, the way this ends up getting portrayed in court, or the way the government tries to portray it in the media, is that these are somehow bad people that intentionally violated the law. That's always how they try to position it. It couldn't be further from the truth. But the other thing that's really interesting about Chris's story is that he created a system that was fully transparent, that did comply with KYC, AML. So the important part here for everybody to understand is that this isn't even an attempt to divert the system. This is literally an attempt to make the system what people already think it is, but it isn't, which is an actual transparent system where the game is actually fair and where you might actually have the ability to find bad behavior.
And it could actually do AML better than any system that currently exists, because we incorporated something called a web of trust, and this was a cryptography invention from like the early cypherpunk ages, from back in the days of like when Adam Back was creating Hashcash, which went on to be a major component of Bitcoin. Somebody else created something called a web of trust, and it was just a science experiment. It was like, oh, look at this cool thing I can make our encryption algorithms do, and oh yeah, okay, and we'll just kind of we don't see any practical applications for this. Well, I did. Well, one of my partners did. He brought it up to my attention, and then I figured out how to actually turn this and make into transactions on a blockchain. And what the web of trust allowed was for issuers it allowed issuers to basically designate groups of addresses that their securities could circulate within, but never be transferred out of. And this would be enforced automatically by the miners as part of the transaction validation check. I see this is on a restricted network. Okay, is the receiving address part of the authorized addresses? Nope. Okay, not a valid transaction. You don't get mined. And again, tested, worked. And so, yeah, as an issuer, you could do this yourself, or you could appoint a third-party agency. And we envisioned companies springing up around this whole process of just vetting investors. And then saying, okay, now, and then they would just certify your address and say, okay, this address belongs to that person. They've passed all of the checks. They're in the clear. They're not a terrorist or a human trafficker or something like that. And yeah, so they're safe. And right now, that functions kind of like on the honor system. Somebody has to put eyes on everything and decide whether or not to allow that to happen. Whereas with our system, it was all automatic. It was enforced by cryptography, and it was absolutely unbreakable and unfuckwithable. And that was a huge selling feature for issuers and these vetting companies. There are already companies that have collections of accredited investors that you, as a startup, if you want to raise money, you go to these they're kind of like investor clubs, basically. But there's money in doing that. And we would make we would really open up a new market for those kinds of companies to come over to Equibit and just continue on doing what they're doing, vetting investors, building lists, and then charging issuers for the ability to connect to them. So then they could circulate amongst those addresses. And it was perfect. It was beautiful. I'm a simplicity guy. I love simplicity. Anybody can introduce complexity into a system to add more functionality, but it takes real effort to do that while simplifying a system. And I that was also kind of one of our core values. And we built and rebuilt different features over and over and over again, trying to find the most efficient way of getting to whatever endpoint it was we were looking for, computationally, from a memory usage standpoint, because Bitcoin is already super inefficient. It's not going to outrun Visa or MasterCard anytime soon, but it's stable, and stability more than anything is what you want at the foundation of your financial system. You can figure out ways of making it faster and cooler looking after, but the foundation has to be rock solid, because we're talking about something that has to carry billions or trillions of dollars and quadrillions of dollars of transactions. And you don't get to screw that up once.
Yep. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So the developer that you had already known for years was a Fed.
Turned into, well, so I feel like there were multiple, there were two officers and multiple informants. So the officers were the two people I had originally founded the company with. One of them was my friend. He went on to be the best man at my wedding. And he was also encouraging me to start developing this crypto idea. He's like, I'll help you. I'm a developer. Look, I can make websites. I can make all these other things. And let's do that together. I want to do this with you, Chris. And he instantly brings in what appears to be his partner, because there's always two. There's always two. They're like Siths. There's always two. And for the Star Wars fans out there, and from there, it seems like they converted my lead core developer into an informant or somebody who they just said, okay, well, you're going to help us destroy this company, and that's going to be kind of like your initiation into our little spy circle. And so that seems to have been the route it played out, or that seems to be the actors involved. And it seems like a lot of effort to go through just to entrap me, but I don't know. Maybe they thought I was valuable because of my role in the world of finance in Canada. I had access to some of the most sensitive financial systems in the country. I'm routinely talking to CEOs and CFOs of the country's largest companies. Maybe somebody in there had a real hard on for me, and they're like, I want this guy working for us.
Well, listen, I mean, this is a theme. So Steve Narioff, who I mentioned earlier, developed the STO structure for T0. And then he ended up also being one of the founding partners of Ethereum. He actually drafted the documents for Ethereum Foundation for their token sale. There's a kind of an interesting long saga.
This wasn't Manny Eager. I think this was somebody else you're talking about.
No, this is Steven Narioff.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this is the guy who I'd mentioned earlier, who, the FBI broke into his house in the middle of the night, threw him in a van, and basically told him they were going to destroy his life unless he, they gave him like a 2-page list of names of people to give up information on, which he didn't do. And then spent time in prison, it destroyed everything that he was working on. And then eventually they dismissed the case, but now he's countersuing. But it's a similar thing because at least from his story and his perspective, he was involved with T0 and trying to get STOs off the ground in the US. And the whole story of, I still don't know what happened to Patrick. Do you know Patrick Byrne?
Yeah. I mean, he became a big supporter of the Mises Institute in the US years ago when he was still CEO of Overstock, before he even left to start his blockchain stuff. So I was very familiar with Pat. I liked what he was doing, and he's supporting the Mises Institute, so that was always nice. The Mises Institute in Canada, our big benefactor was Eric Sprott. I don't know if you know him, but he hasn't been in the media for a little while. He's retired now, but about 10 years ago, he was talking a lot about gold and silver and the gold and silver miners and central bankers and all that good stuff. You'd like him.
Well, yeah, but so Patrick Byrne goes all in on, he was trying to take Overstock and turn it into a blockchain company. He wanted to completely get out of e-commerce, and in fact, he was actively trying to raise about $500 million from China, and all of this money was going to go into these blockchain companies. Most of it was going to go into T0. And I still can't tell because he's got a lot of stories now, and it shifts all the time. And now he's claiming, "Hot surprise! I've been a CIA agent for decades." I've kind of struggled to follow some of the plot at this point, but nevertheless, after talking to Steve Nerioff, it does seem like in 2019 there was a very concerted effort to destroy Patrick Byrne and to destroy his effort to move this to go into blockchain. And the crown jewel of his entire blockchain strategy was T0, which sounds like exactly aligned with what you were doing. And in fact, I remember at one point I was supposed to meet with him. He was supposed to meet at my house, and he ended up going to Boston instead because he was trying to buy Box, which is, I guess, a Canadian options exchange. They were actually trying to buy that and use that for the tokenization of securities. And it literally never got off the ground because Patrick got pushed out. And then the people that remained basically got rid of all of the we lost so much ground, by the way. Imagine $500 million invested in companies building ecosystems around tokenization in 2019. Imagine if that had been allowed to happen where we might be today. And that got killed, and it was very systematic. And so, like I said, there's no doubt in my mind that the idea of tokenizing securities and being able to trade those without third parties is enemy number one. I mean, that is a massive threat to the system.
Yeah, I mean, had we launched Equibit when we intended to, today we'd be approaching peak mining reward blocks. We designed the system to actually, the block production followed a bell curve, just like any mine of any natural resource does. And so, yeah, we wanted to push maximum production rates way out into the future because we didn't want to flood the market with newly minted coins immediately. That seemed like a silly thing to do, especially for the people who participated in the ICO. You're going to just dilute them like crazy the moment you start launching the network. So didn't really want to do that. The natural production curve to me seemed like the right option. And yeah, so we would be heading towards probably the most exciting moment in mining Equibits. And we'd be about 6-7 years into operations. There'd probably be hundreds or thousands of companies on there being actively traded right now, probably billions in market cap and tens of billions or hundreds of billions in transaction volume.
So I want everybody to think about this. So what he's saying is clearly true now, because now what do we have? Now we have Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO, who's also co-chair of the WEF at Davos, saying everything's going to be tokenized. Now all of a sudden there's a big embrace for tokenization, except that the thing is, when you look at the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, they're keeping the custodians. They're keeping the third parties. So you can now start to see exactly what's going on here. What Chris created is something that would have added transparency to markets and would have empowered people and would have made markets more efficient. They didn't want that, but we're still getting tokenization now. But the tokenization we're getting now involves maintaining these third parties, these custodians, but it also involves all of this real-time transaction information, which gets shared with governments and foreign central banks. And, it essentially gives them control, because inevitably the way the legislation is going is ultimately it's going to be programmable and something that these third parties can censor. So this is why we see the after effect of what's happened here, right? They had to kill this.
Financial censorship they have to keep that in place.
They have to keep this in place. And so this is why what Chris created is so important. This is why it's so important now. This is why I still tell people, this is why I've moved towards privacy tokenization. Not that doesn't have its own set of issues, but I will say privacy in general, because we're dealing with, these tokenized systems, whether it's tokenized money, whether it's stable coins, which are tokenized money that can be centrally controlled, or the way they're going to try to tokenize all of our assets. This is kind of the dystopian technocratic version of it. And one way out of that may be through privacy tokenization. But this is fascinating. So again, I hope if you're listening to this, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I just want to make sure that we're explaining the magnitude of what's happened here. And we've even got into, there's a lot more to go into, but this is massive what has happened here. And it seems like it all happened around the same time in the US and Canada, which we'll get into, I guess, I don't know how much of it's speculation on the Five Eyes side of this, but this is just shocking.
We haven't even talked about my honeypot.
No.
I found snooping around trying to access my honeypot. But this phenomenon of innovative tech companies vanishing, their inventions vanishing, and then years later, these toned down, mutilated versions of the tech being reintroduced by big players saying, oh, look at this great innovation we just came up with. I mean, that's the Equibit story as well, because just in December, the SEC granted DTCC a 3-year no action letter to start pilot testing a blockchain-based securities registration system. Basically exactly what we were launching with Equibit, only this one is a closed environment. You still have to go to DTCC and pay DTCC fees to use this. They will be the ones issuing the tokens for your securities, and you still have to go through DTCC to use what ought to be free open source software. So it's just they're taking something that was designed to be for an entirely different delivery method, and they're trying to wrap their pricing structure around it. And the only way they can do that is by crippling the technology. And now the other technology that we developed, that we see now being reintroduced to the industry years after we had done the hard work of inventing it, was HSM wallets. And an HSM is a hardware security module. It's basically a modern day Enigma machine. And these are used by big banks, big financial institutions, the military, the CIA, huge corporations. Like when you go and you buy an SSL certificate from your website, the private key that they use to sign that certificate is generated and housed within one of these modules. They cost more than a car. They're super sophisticated encryption machines. And back in like 2015, we theorized that we might be able to use one of these things as a crypto wallet. And in 2016, we succeeded. And I said, great, fantastic. We're going to put this on the shelf for now and finish the protocol, because we do have to launch that first. And then now we have an enterprise wallet product ready and waiting to go. And so after our company went under, years later, like in 2019, at this point, 2020, we start seeing HSM wallet companies start popping up all over the place. One of them gets acquired by PayPal for like a rumored $250 to $300 million. So, of course, all of this is going into our damages assessment because we can prove we were the first to market with these things. And so the company was destroyed, our ideas were pillaged, and now are being reintroduced by establishment people as if it was their own invention. And this is the history of IP, folks. I mean, yeah, if they can't corrupt or blackmail a founder into running their company the way the deep state wants it run, they'll destroy it, pillage the IP, and then launch their own companies years later with that stuff, or they just kill you and, you go the way of Stanley Myers and they never reintroduce your tech.
Yep. This is absolutely true. And one of the things that they do in the US is they have something called, we have the Invention Secrecy Act of 1952, where you submit your patent and they may determine that it is a threat to national security or economic security, not allow you to publish it, not allow you to even talk about your invention, or it's an automatic 10 or 20 years. So the scenario here is if you submit IP, they'll steal it and suppress it and then later go on and develop it, or all of the tactics that Chris is talking about. And listen, Chris, this is kind of a bit impromptu, but Ray Youssef has just popped in. Okay, do you know Ray?
Yes, I do. I heard about his, I was in Acapulco as well. For an Acapulco. I didn't go to Monerotopia, but I heard about what happened to him after he got off stage there.
Yeah. So do you mind if I bring him up? I mean, I know we've still got a little bit. Usually I do a Q&A at the end, but do you mind if I bring him in?
Yeah, bring him on. Bring him on. It's great.
Right. Ray, how are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm doing great. I heard what you guys were talking about. Yeah, I've been researching all that lost science that we've lost for about 7 years, and the amount of innovation that came out of America and was suppressed, I think, is honestly one of the greatest crimes in humanity. Good points.
Yeah, not a single development team, by the way, has demonstrated a cross-chain atomic swap since we did that. Not one.
That's crazy.
Which is tragic. That was like, for years and years and years, that was like the holy grail of crypto, was cross-chain atomic swaps. We needed to access liquidity within and across chains. And I think it was the Tier Nolan hash time lock contract atomic swap protocol was like, he had already done about 60 to 70% of the work. We had to add a couple of things in front of that so that it would work entirely within the wallet. And then we demoed it. And then we demoed it early 2018. And then we were wrecked pretty soon after that.
So what was the story with the Honeypot and then the situation with your wife?
Oh, well, yeah, it's a mess. It's a mess. If you don't believe yet that I have been targeted, you just need to hear all the rest of this shit that I have in my evidence file. But so it's 2019. The company is, drawing its last and final breaths. And I'm about to file my lawsuit against the government. Now, at this point, I already know that CSIS is onto us in one form or another. And I expected them to start trying to hack me. So I built my own honeypot with a free honeypot software package called Honeypie. Bought a little Raspberry Pi and set it all up, put it on my network, and I named the computer Equibit. And within 24 hours, it logged a computer trying to access it. And that computer's IP address traces back to a US government network. Not just any US government network, a NASA network.
Wow.
Now, why is NASA breaking into my network at home? What is their what possible interest could they have in me or my project? I think it might have something to do with a book I was preparing to get published here called, this is called The Apocalypse of Yajnavalkya. And I,
can you hold that up again? Let me,
you might need to flip the screen there for this part.
I think that was good.
But it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, all the bookstores. It's got great distribution. But that book does deal in a lot of topics that I think people at NASA might be interested in. And so I was frantically working on this after I had received the manuscript. And so maybe that was why it was a NASA computer. Maybe it was just my CSIS hacker using a VPN, and he happened to have a proxy in NASA. I don't know. But either way, there's a U.S. government computer illegally breaking into a Canadian network.
Wow. Well, maybe they wanted to, prevent investments from going to the moon before they did again. But who knows? That is crazy. So, so where's this book available?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon at Barnes and Noble. You can get the ebook through all of there as well. It's also available through Scribed, and yeah, the distribution company is Amazon, obviously, but also Ingram Spark, and Ingram Spark supplies like 30,000 bookstores all over the world or something like that. So you shouldn't have any problem finding it. But this gets into technocracy and ancient history and the UFO phenomenon, and it links it all together with an extraordinarily compelling narrative that is really hard to ignore, because it has DNA proof of what it's saying played out in ancient times. So it can when it says that, people from West Africa went into the Middle East and were met by the native people living in the Middle East and written about in their legends as gods or fallen angels or Anunnakis and all this kind of stuff, that actually happened, folks, and we know exactly when. And this book lays out the entire story, and we get into the Book of Enoch and Hermeticism, lots of occult stuff, but also we cover basically every religion that has ever existed. And it's a mind blower, boys and girls. Wow. Like, I had been studying this stuff since I was a teenager, so I was already about 25 years in on this subject matter. And when I read the manuscript, my head was just spinning after this. I couldn't believe what I just read. Referenced with, DNA records, hundreds and hundreds of studies. It's not channeled woo-woo stuff. It could have been an academic work if it wanted to, but we did not want to package it that way because I think it's a lot more interesting written in the voice it's written. So I hope you agree.
Well, I just downloaded the book, and in fact, I'd love to have you on to talk about that separately. And I actually just put a link, everyone, in the comments to this book. This sounds fascinating. So, wow. All right.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Pretty far departure from encryption and cryptocurrencies and all that kind of stuff, but maybe not. Maybe this stuff is all related somehow. And it does seem to be that the ruling powers of this world are racing against a timeline that they themselves did not set. And they're now rushing towards something that involves UFOs, because we keep hearing about UFO disclosure coming any moment now. Interestingly enough, Eric Weinstein just did an interview on Joe Rogan where he's like, somebody from the CIA has been telling me he started telling me like 3 years ago, we're going to bring you in. We're going to show you some stuff. It's going to change your world. You'll never be the same after that. He's like, and that was 3 years ago. And it's just never happened since then. And 3 years ago, almost to the day is exactly when this was published. So maybe it threw a monkey wrench into some sort of plan or not.
Was that Hal Puthoff by any chance? That was
No, that was Eric Weinstein.
no.
He's,
Eric Weinstein.
He's like a hedge fund mathematician geek kind of guy. His
brother
is the professor at, I think, at one of the universities that got really famous and popular because a whole bunch of wokest students were just freaking out at him because they were having like a day without white people on campus, and he was just like, screw that, I'm going to work.
I know Brett and I are both fellows at the Brownstone Institute, and I was just on the Dark Horse podcast, so I know.
Okay, so yeah, it's his brother Eric. It's his brother Eric, and he's a frequent guest on Rogan. They're both very, very intelligent guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all right. Well, I've got this book that is now moved to the top of my list. That sounds fascinating. So so there are a lot of angles here.
Yeah, I'm 44 years old. I haven't been doing only one thing my entire life, believe it or not. But if anybody wants to learn more about the lawsuits and follow along with that, they could go to equibitlawsuit.com. Forgive me for the website. I slapped it together in like 2 days getting prepared for this show. So it ain't a looker, but it's a start.
Well, I put the link in there as well, and certainly we've got more to discuss here. So what is this story with the World CryptoCon?
Oh my, World CryptoCon, what a shit show. Well, after I gave a talk to a room that was set up for 2,000 attendees, and there was like 3 people in it. Very weird talking to a big giant empty room, but I had to race back to Switzerland to try and continue saving the company, and my wife stayed behind for a couple of more days to finish off the conference, because then she was going to head to Toronto to visit her family and get a medical procedure. And literally the evening I am gone, 2 men from Australia drugged and attempted to kidnap her, which is just
So from Australia, so this sounds like potentially Five Eyes.
100% it's Five Eyes, and I've positively ID'd the 2 men. One of them is a crypto influencer, is one of these guys on YouTube basically shilling ICO scams, which, by the way, folks, those are all black ops funding that's how they do this. Like, probably I'd say I would guess more than half of all the ICO scams were actually the CIA or some element of the Five Eyes or authorized official criminal operations, just to get money into black budgets and black programs. But this guy ran a channel pumping these things. His name is Rev Nissan, and he was there with a friend of his, so-called, named Assam Eltarekmani. Both guys from Australia, and they had come to an event in that evening at a club. My wife was there in a private booth with a couple of our friends, but being a crypto influencer, they invited these people into the booth with them, and the only drink my wife had that evening was handed to her by Rev Nissan. And we believe, based on the effects she described, that it was GHB, which is a well-known date rape drug. And they were trying to get her out of the club with them. And what I think they didn't realize is that my wife has some experience being drugged and raped, unfortunately, And the moment she started feeling the influence of this drug, she just went full on nuclear mode, just kill everything you can lay your hands on. And so she's just completely feral at this point. And 4 security people had to drag her out, each one security guy per limb, basically drag her out, throw her in a cab and send her back to the hotel. And thank God that's all that happened, because I don't know if she would have been raped and then left, or raped and kidnapped and ransomed back to me, or what that could have turned into. But we have managed to dodge a few bullets along the way. Thank you, Lord, and forever grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're listening to this, this stuff sounds hard to believe. I will tell you, I'm seeing patterns that this should be unique, but I mean, this kind of stuff happens all of the time. I remember, I was when I was trying to raise awareness about Roger Vere's campaign, some article came out, and I don't know all the players involved. I know Brock Pierce is involved somewhere, and there was some crypto scam out of Connecticut, and they were actually kidnapping people and trying to ransom them. And fortunately, Roger probably, if he had been in the U.S., he probably would have been a clear target based on what was going on here. So this whole idea of feds and people from the government infiltrating, this happened in Ian Freeman's case. They had a Fed infiltrate Free Talk Live. In fact, they had someone come and spread COVID to everyone, in the radio studio. that was one of the contributions by one of the feds. So this stuff is absolutely real. I mean, it's crazy, I think, for most people to believe. And I think part of it is that part of what's hard to get the story out is it seems so unbelievable, but the fact that it actually happens so often, we should probably get a panel together to kind of share stories so that people understand that this is not an isolated event. This is an actual standard practice.
Yes, standard practice. I wanted you to get there because I wanted to bring up a story, actually, maybe 7-8 years old now, but the guy has finally been sentenced. But this is a guy who was a CIA officer, and he was assigned to a particular area of the United States. And they never said what his real job was, but it appears that his job was to drug, kidnap, and rape women. Because the only reason this guy went down is because one of the women he had kidnapped came out of her drug-induced stupor and managed to get out of his apartment and out onto the streets. And then the local police noticed. So at this point, the CIA throws him under the bus, disavows everything, and now he's in jail. But this guy is alleged to have drugged and raped hundreds of women. So, like, how are you doing anything else other than profiling and targeting women to drug and rape? And to what end? Like, are you just trying to get the crime stats up in a particular jurisdiction for some reason? Or are you just spreading terror and uncertainty? Or like, what is the goal? What's your angle? Because these are, for lack of a better word, these are all PR stunts or psyops. It's AstroTurf campaigns and fake protesters and crisis actors. And it, like, all these things, and you're watching TV, all these things, everything you see coming off of your TV or your computer screen needs to go through that filter. And you need to have a framework of skepticism that you apply to every piece of media you see from anywhere that is going to force you to ask these kinds of questions. Because everything you see on screen is a lie of one form or another. Even this is, you're only seeing the picture. You don't see what's on the other side of the camera, or if there's anything at all on the other side of the camera. This could be a green screen. I could be in my real office. I mean, I could spin the camera around. I'll show you the office, but we need to be conscious consumers of media. And don't go and take a government class about that, because they're just going to tell you to, oh, well, consult trusted authorities. And they'll tell you what you can and cannot believe. And you need to get that out of your head, that authority even is a thing. Like, authority should be like a verboten word for you. Any free person just despises that word because it doesn't exist. We all know it doesn't exist. There's respect, but you've got to earn respect. Authority is just something people claim to have, and then we're supposed to simulate respect, because I wave around this word called authority. And that's part of this. That's part of the psyop. That's part of the, 12, 13 years in school, asking a teacher, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, 3 bags full. May I please go to the bathroom? Can I speak yet? That you've had that conditioned into you, but this is not a natural mode of human existence. And it's never been. We have had tribal chiefs and people with responsibilities and are respected for how well they execute those responsibilities, but there has never been an authority, anything other than God.
Yep, that is a very important point, and I talk about that on this show often, and we need to remember that in general. I mean, we need to reclaim our free will, and we need to get back to natural law and stop believing in this fake authority, and then stop believing that other people are going to come in and solve our problems. They're not coming in with the intention of solving our problems. They're coming in with the intention of, frankly, at this point, further enslaving us through technocracy. And I just, this has happened with Trump over and over again. I mean, I was telling people before the election, said, look, it'd be great if you're supporting him for, because he might free Ross. That's one thing, but do not expect for any minute that he's going to come in and fix any problem at all. And no politician is going to do that for us. And we're actually running out of time on that, because the technocracy is closing in really fast. And these kinds of techniques, and the importance of this is, I've actually been talking to some people that got all caught up. So for the last, I ran for president in 2024 specifically to raise awareness around the CBDC issue. And my campaign slogan was, I had this shirt that had a big heart on it, and it said, "Bank run now, stop World War III, halt CBDCs and the Fed." Then the whole campaign was, don't vote for me, exit the fiat and start building parallel systems. I use that as kind of the tagline, but my whole purpose of this was to try to educate people on the Republican side in the primary about the threat of CBDCs, and boy, did that backfire. I wrote this book, and Vivek Ramaswamy read it, and he and I had 3 conversations about it, and then he came out in my home state of New Hampshire and told Trump to come out against CBDCs, and Trump came out against CBDCs, and people actually think that we've halted CBDCs, not realizing that we now have something worse through the Genius Act. And so that's been a source of frustration, but we are very much at the late stage here. So, all right. So back to your story. So then, all right. So your business has been destroyed. You've essentially been run out of the country. You have gone through all of this stuff with kind of CSIS, with the equivalent of the SEC. So then what's the process from there?
Well, we begin suing the government. And then almost immediately I have that NASA computer invade my home network, have all kinds of other surveillance installed that is done via the cooperation of ISPs. Because the way this works is just the intelligence agency will just go to the court, get a secret warrant, serve it on the ISP, and then boom. There's backdoors in all the routers, and they can just see your home network like they were plugged right into it. And so I knew that they were going to be using all of that kind of stuff. And it's very hard for me to detect them using that. So one of my strategies was, well, expect them. They're going to hack you. They're going to invade all of your devices. And you're not like a platinum level cybersecurity expert. You're an accountant, so your skills lay elsewhere. and I don't necessarily have the tools to fight them at that game. However, I don't have to beat them at their game because I can make them play my game, and I'm very good at that game. And so one of the things I did was leave the country. And there were multiple reasons for doing so. I mean, Justin Trudeau had just announced that there would be no more flights out of the country to the Caribbean and Mexico. So that was my tip off that a complete closure of all travel out of the country was coming. And this is in 2021. So we're deep into COVID at this point. But as soon as he made that announcement, I just chartered a private plane because they were still flying to Mexico, and off we went. But I wanted to do this. The reason why I wanted to do this is because now their warrants don't work, and they have to hack me via conventional hacking means, which are much easier to detect. And boy, did they ever try, and boy, did I ever detect all kinds of attempts. One thing I learned, though, is they are using malware that can evade CrowdStrike sensors, believe it or not. And I've already called CrowdStrike and asked for their help in this. I don't expect it will happen, though, because all of these cybersecurity companies are run by cowards. They refuse to help private citizens on cybersecurity issues when the perp has a chance of being the government. They won't do it. They won't help you. It doesn't matter how much you're paying them. They won't help you. I had a good friend of mine, somebody I had worked with across multiple companies. He was one of the top cybersecurity people in Canada. His name is George Plitus. And he was a good friend of mine. I was talking to him about cybersecurity and what I should do to detect things. He recommended I build a honeypot. Great, fantastic. He also referred me to a friend of his that was running a cybersecurity firm in Canada called Kodai Solutions, who as soon as I told them I'm pretty sure it's the government hacking me, they were like, nope, we're not helping you. Bye. But the day I detected that NASA computer hacking into my honeypot, I told George, I'm like, hey, George, I just detected a NASA computer on my honeypot. And then he asked me, well, how do you know it's a NASA computer? And I sent him the reverse IP trace report that I ran that says the NASA High Performance Computation Center on it is where this computer was from. I have never heard from him since, and that was 6 years ago. He ghosted me, somebody I'd known for years. So yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is a joke. It's an absolute joke. They'll sell you products, but if the government decides to attack you, you're on your own. And I even hired a coder from way outside of the country, on the other side of the world, to help me build a couple of things. And sure enough, immediately, my government hacker, starts trying to spoof emails from me to him. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the contents of those emails because I had what's called a DMARC policy on my domain, which a DMARC is like all email verification, validation. It's anti-spam, anti-spoofing stuff. But my DMARC policy at that point in time was set to the maximum, which is just reject the message that fails verification. So unfortunately, this guy's email server did not keep those messages. So we can't see what my hacker was actually trying to say, only that we have a report that somebody tried to fake my email address to talk to my developer. So it seems like every time I try to engage an IT resource, the Five Eyes immediately have a go at this person and either try to intimidate them out of my life or flip them into another adversary for me. But it's been pretty funny because their MO is always the same, and now it's become incredibly easy for me at this point now to bait them. And I don't even do it anymore because at this point I've done it like 8 or 9 times, and really, how many smoking guns do I need to get a conviction? I think I'm just probably wasting my time at this point, given the amount of evidence that I've gathered.
So let's talk about the lawsuit itself. So what is in the lawsuit, and I've told everybody you can go to equibitlawsuit.com, but maybe what's kind of the high level overview, and what is the status of the lawsuit?
There's actually 2 lawsuits because there were 2 attempts against the company. One via the OSC that failed, and then the other via sabotage, which succeeded in destroying the company, but not me personally, which it was really, I feel, targeted towards. It was to discredit me permanently. The first lawsuit is about what we've already talked about. It's against the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, the informant within the company that sabotaged our code, and a couple of John Does who, at this point, we have positively identified. Those John Does were supposed to be the actual CSIS officers. We know who they are now, but I don't know if I want to name them in the suit and pull them into court anymore. I don't want to give them another circus to perform in front of. But there are so many other accomplices to that lawsuit at this point, including banks, email marketing platforms, cybersecurity firms. So much deeper pockets. And I've got 2 blank spots in that lawsuit that I can name them in if I want to. So I have that there. And so that's the one lawsuit. Now that lawsuit, we've been through discoveries. We've interrogated other CSIS officers in discovery, and they really just shit the bed on that because the government's defense was, we don't know anything about this company or its people. And in discovery, we were interrogating a CSIS officer, and we asked him, well, do you know anything about this person? Do you know anything about that person? Do you know anything about that person? And he's saying, well, yes, we do know about these people. And okay, so do you not know anything about the company, or do you know anything about the company? And so they're really not doing a good job defending themselves. They really thought that they would be able to just kill me or figure out a way to force me to withdraw these lawsuits through some other entrapment scheme or some extrajudicial means. But at this point now, I have their head over a barrel, and we're awaiting a trial date at this point. We just had our mediation session, which is sort of like the final last-ditch effort or opportunity to reach a settlement before going to trial. But, I mean, the Attorney General didn't even want to look me in the eye during that meeting because, I mean, I've so thoroughly demoralized their entire team, I think, at this point, that they're like they probably want to settle, but their boss is just telling them no. And it's unfortunate because, of course, they're throwing these young, fresh-faced lawyers at me, and I'm absolutely tearing them to bits because I can credibly accuse them of working with child traffickers. And they can't really say anything about this. One of them, when I did that, is like, oh, what's your source for that? And I'm like, the CBC. He thought he was kind of thinking he'd get me in some sort of gotcha moment where I'm like citing Alex Jones as if I would ever cite an intel agent back at them. But the second lawsuit is against a different group of people for a conspiracy, basically, to defraud the company, take the tech, defraud the original founders, and libel me out of a career. But those people are all tied up in legal knots now. One of them is about to be convicted because he has We've found he was the ringleader of that whole effort to just flood our Discord channel, flood Twitter with negative messaging about Equibit and myself personally, to ensure the company could not find founders or could not find additional investors, and then collapsed. So the ringleader of that went into hiding. We couldn't find this guy for like 2 years, and not for lack of trying. We hired professional investigators in Canada and the United States to go looking for this guy, and they could not find him. And they all told us, like, I've never had these kinds of problems finding someone before, unless they're being protected by the government. And we've heard that very same thing from not one, but 2 investigators who were looking for this guy. We eventually do find him, but he has yet to file a defense, probably because we have him on tape, and the contents of that tape prove that he knows he was lying. So now, not only do I have a civil case against him, but this will go to the criminal courts when I'm done with them. But interestingly enough, this is where my larger strategy came into play, because when it came out that there was a spy, at least one spy in our organization, I did suspect one of my partners, one of the co-founders of the project, the guy who encouraged me to start it to begin with, the best man at my wedding. I did suspect him, almost like practically immediately, because of the surprise and the fear on this coder's face as he's telling me this story. It was a look of recognition. He knew who the CSIS officer was personally. And so I suspected it was my friend. And when I was getting ready to file this second lawsuit, my friend asks me to join as a co-plaintiff. And so I immediately realized that if I allow him to do this and I carry that lawsuit far enough, he will eventually have to betray me. And so all I have to do is keep pushing this suit forward and wait. And sure enough, last August, he did. He betrayed the company. And he gathered up the other people in that lawsuit and attempted a hostile takeover of Equibit Group and tried to force me out for the only reason of shutting down the lawsuit. No other reason. And fortunately, there were protections. Investors cannot betray the company like that and keep their shares. And so he lost his shares, and a couple other people lost their shares. And so now, I mean, the company is effectively owned by me and our initial angel investor. And that's it now. It's just the two of us moving ahead with this case. And, but yeah, I beat a spy at their own game. You walked right into my trap, and I had you playing the fiddle for me. And it's all in the emails going back and forth. It's pretty pathetic, the way he tries to gaslight me after the fact, after he's been caught, and he basically just outed himself. But he's just ignoring absolutely everything I'm telling him, which is completely legally sound. And he's saying, no, I'm in charge now. And okay, bye. But this is just part of the government strategy. They cannot meet me in court, because once I get into court and enter all this stuff against them, like, it's going to be a courtroom spectacle. And the government is not going to look good. This is going to shatter most people's realities.
So as I understand it, so it's $140 million in combined damages. Is that right, across the two lawsuits?
120 million against CSIS and 20 million against the other conspiracy.
I mean, so is it usual for, I mean, maybe this is a Canadian thing, but for a lawsuit to even go forward? I mean, that's it. I'm trying to imagine somebody suing the CIA in the US.
Well, I think it would play out the same way it plays out here. The CIA will not engage you in court. They will harass and intimidate you and force you into dropping the lawsuit.
So,
but it's not like the CIA or CSIS is technically a civilian operation. They inform the military, and yes, you cannot sue the military, but you can sue the CIA because they are part of the civilian apparatus.
So if you win, then this sets a whole new precedent, right? So, I mean, let's talk about what happens if you win this case and what this could mean for the crypto industry and for Five Eyes.
Well, if I win this case, I have now proven in court that the Five Eyes is actively engaged in malevolent operations against the cryptocurrency industry. They're steering and controlling innovation within Canada, within the United States, and globally. There are God knows how many other inventions and companies that have been smashed this exact same way, just so they can steal and use their inventions in, private black ops, or keep it all to themselves in the military. Or then, when they're finally done with it, then they'll wrap a private entity around it and say, oh, look at this new Silicon Valley startup and what a great thing they've built. And it's called LifeLog. Whoops, I mean Facebook.
Yep.
But at right now, that is just a rumor. But if I win, this is now established case law that lawyers will have to learn about and have to come to an understanding that, yes, this goes on in the world and you have to be ready to defend people against governments that are doing it.
So what has been the response that you've gotten from the press? What's happened as you've tried to tell this story?
Absolute radio silence. Nobody in the mainstream media has responded to me, and it's not for a lack of trying or a lack of connections, because when I was running the company, I was in the mainstream media all the time. I've had appearances on CBC and Bloomberg and Business News Network, and a lot of stations had me on to talk about that, because of course this is the height of the ICO craze, and I'm providing a pretty solid perspective to counterbalance what they're hearing coming out of the regulators, which is just it sounds like religious proselytizing. It's always the same thing. They're all securities, and we're going to shut them all down. It's all securities. We're going to shut them all down. Investor safety, rah rah rah. And no, they weren't giving any kind of nuanced opinion. And so they would have me on to counterbalance that, but they don't have me on anymore. And, we had built a list of thousands of journalists in Equibit, and I had emailed all of them via a email marketing platform called SendX or SendGrid. SendX, SendGrid, it's the same company. And I prepare my email campaign, send it out, and I get the campaign data coming in, and I see the opens and the clicks. And so the engagement rate on the campaign is sky high. So I am expecting my phone to be ringing off the hook at this point, but nobody reaches out. I try this again. Second campaign, same thing. Massive engagement on the email marketing platform dashboard, but zero real world response. So I'm pretty disheartened at this point, feeling pretty alone, and I just give up on reaching out for a long time, actually. And just in the last maybe about 6 months or so, I've been trying to bring this back out to the public's attention because we're getting so close to a conclusion now. And so much more heinous stuff has happened. But I went back into the dashboard, and on the main dashboard page, all the email campaign data had been wiped out. It was all zeros across the board. So I start talking to Sendex support. Hey, where's my data, guys? What's going on? Oh, that's weird. Oh, I have no idea why that happened. We'll get on it trying to recover that data for you right away. And then next day, the message comes out. Oh, your data's been deleted. Here's our terms and conditions. We're allowed to do this. Stop bothering us. And I'm like, well, hold on a second, folks, because I need that data back. This is part of an active court case against the Canadian government. First of all, and you know, I'm glad you brought up your terms and conditions, because you never notified me that my data was scheduled for deletion, which you're supposed to do. But at that point, they shut right up. Sendex will not talk to me anymore. Now, I did explore through the platform a little bit, and I found my marketing data cached in widgets in other areas of this marketing the Sendex marketing platform. So they deleted it, but they did a terrible job deleting it. So this was clearly not an official deletion. Otherwise, I would have been notified at least 30 days in advance that my account is scheduled for deletion. But either somebody in Sendex who is an informant was told to, hey, go in and scrub that data, and they didn't do a very good job at it. Or maybe they were hacked and had it deleted. I don't know. Sendex is not talking to me. But like I said, I've got 2 John Does in my lawsuit against CSIS, so they might have just volunteered.
So I'm thinking as you're talking about this, because this
well, I suspect that my email never actually left their servers, and I was just fed a bunch of bogus campaign data that then they went in after the fact to try and delete out because it's a cover-up. But, you know, incidentally, a federal court judge in Canada just ruled against the Canada Revenue Agency because somebody was suing the Canadian Revenue. It was a charity, a Jewish charity, for better or for worse, I suppose, lost their charitable status, and they're suing the Canadian Revenue Agency, the Canadian IRS, over the loss of their status. And the court had ordered the CRA to produce some documents, which the CRA ought to have had, but then the CRA later said, oh, well, we don't have that anymore. It's gone. And so the judge was furious at them, and they said, and he said that anybody involved in any part of a cover-up, from the guy who orders it, from the person putting the paper in the shredders, will face civil and criminal liability.
Who said that?
Thank you. This is a federal court justice in Canada. So thank you for that. You've just given me a wonderful tool for me to beat CSIS over the head with. Because, yeah, they're engaging in a cover-up, and they're employing private companies to help them. And I can prove it.
So here's the challenge with this. So there are a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of complexity to this, and this is similar to other stories. And I'm as we're just going through this, I mean, I do see there's a big narrative here that if we actually take a couple of different cases and put them together, I think we can start to see a pattern emerge. And this pattern, you know, we haven't talked much about my background, but I got involved in this 3.5 years or so ago when I started to see people like Ian Freeman and friends and others that I knew that were being targeted by the federal government, and I wanted to know why. And that's when I, you know, saw Joe Biden had just signed this executive order authorizing CBDCs and a whole of government crackdown on crypto. And I've just kept following this. And then that turns into that being part of Technocracy. But basically what And then, I've gone down all of the different rabbit holes of exactly how long the U.S. has been working on a CBDC, who's been involved. And this actually ends up tying into Jeffrey Epstein, and they've taken some Bitcoin developers and had them work on, through MIT Media Lab, CBDCs, as well as tokenization platforms. Mike Hearn is involved with something called Regulated Liability Network. So I just keep on following where it's going. And your story fits in with several other stories, which are basically the idea of the government on a coordinated basis using its power and leverage to suppress people who are promoting the use of cryptocurrency as a peer-to-peer alternative to central bank currency. And an even bigger, for people don't know about it because it doesn't get as much coverage, but an absolute shutdown on the tokenization of equities. And as I try to explain to people, money represents 5% of global assets. It's, everything else that, mainly securities, but obviously land and everything else, that's actually a much bigger part of the economy, but people don't think about it or talk about it. That has been actively suppressed. This seems to have been coordinated. Maybe it'd be good to get you connected to Stephen Nerioff. I mean, I think there's a note comparing here because he was dealing with the FBI, the SEC in the exact same time frame. All of this began at about the same time. So I'm just throwing this off now, but it's because I'm trying to figure out how to tell this story, because now this is going on right now. Your lawsuits are a significant threat to the Genius Act and the Clarity Act and what they're trying to do with the centralized tokenization of assets. Like, this is really bad timing for them, which puts you at risk. And I've had other people on. I had a guy named Joe Rotes who started Dragon Chain, and he had a protracted lawsuit with the SEC. And again, this is Canada, so I have a lot more experience talking to people and going to court and reading legal documents in the U.S., although I suspect, we're going to find out because there's overlap in coordination. But when it comes down to the legal process, just so that people understand, and next week I'm going to have the lawyers on for Roman Sterlingoff, everything that you've said here is true about not only them trying to falsify your email traffic, suppress the content going out, but even in the case of Roman Sterlingoff, for instance, people have heard of Chainalysis, which is used to track transactions. And if I get this wrong, I apologize. I believe in my opinion, it's CipherTrace. I'll find out when I have the lawyers come on. But they tried to bring in one of the other companies, not Chainalysis. And in the end, they had kind of mapped out and definitively proven that in this Roman Sterlingoff case, it couldn't have been Roman Sterlingoff. But then all of a sudden, mysteriously, the CipherTrace, or whichever company it was, person that they'd hired and paid a lot of money, disappeared. And so they lost their expert witness right as they're going up and trying to explain away the Chainalysis part of the story. So I'm saying all of this. I don't even know why I'm saying this, other than to say I'm trying to map out, as you go through this court process, what I've seen in the Joe Rotes case is that they will have you go through massive amounts of discovery and spend a lot of money, and then they'll lose the discovery so that you have to then go and produce it again at your expense. There's a tactical component to the legal process that you're going up against, which you already know, but you've obviously got to, and what I'm just thinking out loud is, how can we continue to get the narrative of this story out in the public as easily as we can, and then maybe connect it to other cases and tell a broader story so that we can keep up the pressure. It is incredibly important for the public to understand your story, because if this information does not get out to the public, they will continue to use the kinds of tactics that they've been using technically and through sabotage and through all of these other things.
If you don't stop them now, they're just going to do it again and again and again and again.
They're going to do it again. And in my opinion, this is tied up with everything that the Clarity Act is for and everything else. The technocratic agenda is you will own nothing. The mechanism for you owning nothing is through the tokenization of money and all other assets in a way that governments and third parties have control over, that they can program, they can track, and they can censor. And that is the heart of the plan for technocracy. And everybody, Chris included, in a major way, probably, actually, this is, probably the most important conversation that I've had, and this is the most important story relative to what's going on with the Clarity Act. Now, I will tell you, I've had a almost impossible time. Talking about the Genius Act, you can maybe get a little bit of traction. Almost no one knows about the Clarity Act. I mean, I travel around all over the place, give talks. I will even go to crypto conferences. I mean, even at Anarchapulco, right? I mean, we were both there, but I'm giving a talk. Most people that came up to me were not familiar with the Clarity Act, or their understanding of it was something completely different. And so I've dug into this. I've dug into, okay, well, why is it that, I'm going through social media and I see these posts and everyone's like, we've got to pass the Clarity Act now. And it's like these crypto publications, and they're all these likes and all these reshares and all of these comments. And I'm like, okay, is there really organic support for what I think is the biggest surveillance bill? And it turns out it's all fake. It turns out the crypto publications are owned by companies that benefit from it. Then you dig into it and you find out there are 220 former regulators that are now working with consulting firms and lobbying firms to push the legislation over. And you have the banking lobby and the crypto lobby, both, they're not really at odds with one another. They're just trying to figure out how to carve up the surveillance system they're put in place. There's not a single person that is at the table that is there trying to defend anybody's individual rights or privacy or anything. There's like literally nobody's being paid to do this. There are people being paid $2,000 an hour to suppress, to put this stuff in place. And then it turns out the traffic is fake. They're bots. There's no real engagement. I put up the day2026.com. I've got a section on the bills where I break down for Clarity and Genius. I name the specific lobbyists and media and trade associations and everything involved in this. This is all part of the same thing. I've been trying to warn people about Clarity, and you had a solution that, had it not been suppressed, the Clarity Act would be moot, because people would be trading securities on a self-custody basis in a transparent way. That would already be taking place. That's been killed. That's been suppressed. You're still going through what you're still trying to go through. And then I'm trying to, warn people about what the Clarity Act means. But I mean, I'm just one guy. There's no money in telling the truth, and there's no outlet for telling the truth, because Bloomberg has no incentive. All of the advertisers through the media benefit from this as well. I mean, they don't make any money because nobody's buying ads for peer-to-peer solutions. Nobody's buying ads to discuss surveillance, and so this remains a problem. I've said that if the Clarity Act passes, that's kind of the final nail in the coffin. So as I'm saying this out loud, I'm trying to think about, maybe we can connect some of these other cases and start telling a broader story about what's going on here. And then continuing to provide updates and to try to, piece together chunks, visuals, whatever it happens to be, in short segments to keep people in the loop and to make it understandable, and maybe tell an overall narrative, but bring a number of these cases in, because I just worry that, I'm urging people, if you're listening to this, please like this, please share this, and continue to do this. But we need to continue throughout your journey on the legal process to blast this out. And I will say, I don't know if you can travel or if it's even advisable to travel, but we're doing this Enemies of the State event in Washington, D.C. It's not part of the Libertarian National Convention, but we're doing it at the same venue since there's going to be a big nexus of people there. But the important part about this is I've already lined up people to co-live stream with me. So we've got so far at least 1 million viewers, and I'm shooting to get 3 million viewers. So the real benefit is to get however many it is. It may be 11 or 12 quote enemies of the state, but crypto prisoners, so on and so forth, and have somebody, in most cases, speaking on their behalf if they're in prison, or in your case, if you can either speak in person or pre-record something. I want to use this live stream and really push the live stream as a way for us to try to get the combined story out to millions of people about what's going on with the lawfare. And then in your case, yours is the only actual lawsuit against the state, which is what makes it unique and powerful.
Yeah. And I'm really holding their feet over the fire, because I basically have the government of Canada now in a position where they either have to kill me, pay me, or destroy their own country, because their strategy has, again, been don't engage this person in court, do everything you can extrajudicially to force him to withdraw the lawsuit. So in the meantime, they have completely destroyed the rules of civil procedure in Ontario, because when you're served with a civil lawsuit in Ontario, you have 20 days to file a defense. You get 30 days if you file something called a notice of intent to defend, which is you just indicate to the court, yes, I will defend, but I just need a little more time. When it came to the government did not do that. They filed a notice of intent to defend, but they took over 10 months before they finally showed up with a one-page defense. I know nothing, saw nothing, blah, 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 which of course now we know that was, you just perjured yourself, because the CSIS officer in discovery says that was not true. So there's that. But then there's also the case of the informant, the developer that we named in the suit. His name is Sergey, by the way. And so we serve Sergey. He doesn't file a defense or a notice or anything. He just completely ignores it. And he goes into default. We continue serving him with multiple times with hundreds of pages of documents. And he still ignores everything. So we get a default conviction of $1.7 million against this guy. And then we do an asset search. We find a bank account. And that's it. That's all the guy has. No house, no car, nothing. Just a bank account with almost $500,000 of cash sitting around in it. So either you are the world's worst investor or financial planner, or that's not your money, Sergey. Because as soon as we seized it, he immediately lawyers up, leaps into action, and then moves to overturn his conviction. But to overturn a default conviction, you have to convince the court that the reason why you didn't show up, you had really, really, really good reason to not do that. And so his first reason was, oh, I thought this was fake. I thought it was all fake. I'm like, okay, well, did you call the lawyers whose names and phone numbers and emails were all over the documents you were being served? Did you check out their law firm? Did you make any attempt to see if they were actual lawyers? No, I didn't do that. Did you call your own lawyer? Nope, didn't do that either. And did you call the court to see if this is actually a lawsuit that has been opened up against you? No, I didn't do that either. Well, what did you do? Oh, I Googled. Okay. And so the judge is like, well, okay, what else you got? What else you got? And then the other thing he came up with is oh, well, the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. And so I was really distracted by that because I have family back in Russia. And so this all falls apart because when his defense was due, the Russia-Ukraine war had not even begun. And it would not begin for months and months and months and months after he was obliged to file his defense. So sorry, Sergey, but both of these excuses are not credible. However, the judge, and it went to a different judge than the judge that originally convicted him. But this judge then all of a sudden says, "Oh, perfectly reasonable. Oh yeah. Oh, this is yeah. Oh, what a terrible thing that happened to you. You know, this evil crypto company might be, you know, trying to defraud you, poor Russian guy. And so we're just going to overturn the last 2 years of work that they put in and make them start all over again from the beginning." So at this point now, anybody served with a civil lawsuit, because this guy is not special by all accounts. He's just another guy. So any other guy can now ignore civil lawsuits in Canada, folks. That's called precedent. You can just use exactly the same excuses as this guy. Well, I thought it was fake. Sorry, guys. Whoops. My bad. Okay, I promise to participate now. And that has never been an allowable excuse in the history of the entire country. But apparently now in this particular moment it is. So, yeah, if this is the strategy, if you're going to destroy the foundations of the country, I accept. That's fine. You know, I said I'll take money or blood, and it looks like we're gonna have blood. So let's watch a nation get carved up. But yeah, I did send an offer letter to the Attorney General of Canada right after we interrogated the CSIS officer, and he just detonated their entire defense. I sent an offer to settle, and I said, okay, if you want to end this before we get to trial, you're going to pay me exactly what I claimed in the lawsuit. And if you want me to sign an NDA, it'll be double.
Yep. Well, this is so this is interesting. So the next step. So what is the next actual milestone?
Well, we are going to get a production order from the court, which is probably just going to force CSIS to give us an empty file bin. But of course, we'll be reminding the court and CSIS of that federal judge's ruling that has just gone out, saying that anybody in the government involved at any level of a cover-up is probably gonna go to jail. And so we have a list of people already compiled, people who work at the government at various capacities who have assisted CSIS. One of them being the Office of the Information Commissioner, because we had served CSIS with a bunch of access to information requests, which is kind of like a Freedom of Information Act. It's Canada's version of the same thing, but they were just playing games with us as we were trying to get information out. And at this point now, we have undeniable proof that they unreasonably denied our requests and that they did not give us documents that they did in fact have in their possession. This we already have proof of. Yeah, that ruling could not have come at a better time, because yeah, they have been engaged in a cover-up. I can prove they've engaged in a cover-up because, of course, I'm an auditor and I know a cover-up when I see one. You know, a trail of deletions is as good as the trail of evidence.
Yep.
Because all you have to do is follow the trail of deletions, and it always leads you to one person, and that's who you throw in jail.
Yep. So this is, so I think, you know, what I want to try to do is figure out how to take the timelines here and, you know, try to put it into some visuals that are a bit more digestible. And then again, I want to go look at some of these other cases and put all of these cases on a timeline, because I think that again, the home run here is the fact that I think that if you do win this, you may be able to get through discovery access to this Five Eyes information. And if you get access to that Five Eyes information, I think that is going to actually link a variety of these other cases together. We're going to be able to show this overall picture. At some point, we're going to be able to tell the story of what actually has been going on the last several.
Well, the other partner, my other partner and suspected CSIS officer, is an employee at Google. He's one of their high-level software engineers at Google. So like these people like are embedded in tech. They are embedded in finance because they are then positioned to implant malware or surveil the customers of these companies.
Yep. Yeah, these are also tactics. I mean, I will say on my end, I've recently been approached by a couple of different recruiters that are clearly trying to recruit me for jobs that I would never take. But it's very clear from my perspective is that they're trying to recruit me so that I don't continue to do what I'm doing. Right. So I think people need to understand the variety of tactics here. And I think being able to, because we've done this tonight, I think we've just talking about it. We've put together some connections. I think to be able to start telling the story about the operating procedure of what they do in all of these different cases, including, by the way, the tactics with your lawsuit. I think one of the things is if we can put together the visual and the timeline and then keep people up to date so that there's a background of this is the background of the case, but then as you're going through the individual steps, because if we can do that and then elevate this and get more people to share information about this and get it out there, it can hold them accountable for their tactics. It to me, one of the most shameful things, and this started for me in 2023 at Ian Freeman's sentencing hearing, it's just seeing the degree to which, you know, if people have never experienced any of this, they don't have any framework. They still believe in that there's a justice system and that it's blind and that it's fair. And they have some sense that the government is actually seeking the truth. And the government is not. We're going to have the lawyers on next week. And I know one of the guys, Mike, on the Sterlingoff case said, look, this was his first case out of law school. And he said it completely changed his entire perspective of the law. I mean, we're finding out things like that there are judges that own percentage ownership interests in private prisons that they're sending, you know, the people that are convicted in their courtroom to. Like, the whole thing is not.
I mean, there was a judge convicted of laundering children into the arms of child placement agencies. He would literally rule against the parents just so that they could seize the child and send them into these adoption agencies, and he was getting kickbacks from them.
Yep. Yeah, this happens in Pennsylvania. I know that was a big thing here in Pennsylvania. There was a big documentary on this, and apparently this is more common practice. And so I think that part of this is, as you're going through your process, if we can magnify whatever you're going through. I mean, I hope that you win, but I hope that we can help amplify what they're doing tactically, because I think, to me, more important, well, the case itself is important, but it's also critically important that people begin to understand how these systems actually work, as opposed to how they've been propagandized to believe that they work. Because from my perspective, that's the biggest hurdle we have to overcome, because the stuff that you've talked about seems so unlikely based on the propaganda and lack of direct experience, but it's not. And so we have to figure out how to let people know what's actually going on as it's going on. And I'm hoping that, you know, this will be a start tonight, but I think there's more work to do to kind of to cobble some of this together. I think Enemies of the State can be a platform that will helpfully elevate this to more. I mean, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people, based on the way that we're getting the live stream set up. And then I would love to connect you with some other people that have had similar experiences in the US and see if there's anything that comes out of those conversations by way of comparing notes that might.
I'm interested. I'm interested. The last time I went to the United States was for the inaugural Cosmic Summit, which is that more to do with the book we were talking about earlier, but that was in 2023, and it was in I think it was like Ashburn, Virginia, or something like that is where it was, or North Carolina, somewhere there around the Mideast. And I checked my luggage bag And then I get off the plane and I go to the luggage area and my bag isn't on the turnstile. And I go to the help desk and I'm like, where's my luggage? And they look up, I had the little bag ticket and I give it to them. And they look it up and they're like, oh, it's been seized for search. And we should get it back tomorrow and we'll just ship it to your hotel. And I'm like, what the hell kind of search are you subjecting my bag to that's going to take you an entire day?
Wow.
And this was not the only time I've been subjected to enhanced security procedures at airports. In February 2019, when my wife and I were moving back to Canada from Switzerland after the company had basically run out of money, we were in that area with the turnstiles going to get our bags. Our bags are there, but as we're getting them, somebody from airport security comes up to us and asks for us by name. Are you Chris and are you Mira? And we're like, yes. And we're like, okay, grab your bags and follow me into the screening area. And they searched our bags like thoroughly. And I'm there just like, of course I know what this is about. I've been flagged. CSIS put out some sort of advisory that I've got a bag full of gold bricks or something. I don't know what these idiots are doing, watching too much Wolf of Wall Street or something like that. But they call us the conspiracy theorists, but your job is literally to spin conspiracy theories and not only do that, but then also act on them with the force of law and guns. So which one of us is more dangerous, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist?
Well, exactly. Well, so, in this point, obviously, if the people listening to this, we had Roger Ver, who was arrested in Spain and then thrown in the same prison as John McAfee. We have, when I was at Moneratopia, the previous Moneratopia, I remember hanging out with Ray, who's here, and some other folks that were also not allowed. And Amir Taki is another one. Amir Taki was at Moneratopia 2 Moneratopias ago. He was on the agenda to speak. Was not able to get into Mexico. And then Ray was deported from Mexico. So this stuff is 100% legitimate. Part of it is these are people that I know. And in fact, at this point, Moneratopia at the end, I kind of felt like it was some kind of surveillance thing. It just felt weird after what happened to Ray. And then, I'm kind of like, all right, here we are. We're in the middle of Mexico City, but it's like, how many feds are here, right?
Well, yeah, it's like that crypto con that I was telling you about where my wife got drugged. And she wasn't the only one. Like, we personally knew 2 other people who were drugged during that conference. And just the whole vibe of that event was just seemed like it was just a dog and pony show. That it wasn't a real conference. It seemed as though maybe the whole thing was actually put on by the intelligence community.
Yeah. That wouldn't surprise me. And it is getting to the point, I'm kind of like, I'm usually at conferences talking about, it started out talking about one person, and then now it's like, now I go to these conferences and it's 8 people. And now we're doing Enemies of the State again with more people. And so it's, so this is real and it's building. And to me, I've just started trying to track this stuff down. I got into crypto and Bitcoin in 2012. I stopped using a personal bank account in 2019. And I spent a lot of time thinking that you could change the political system. And then I realized now that's not the case. So I'm like, all right, I'm done with politics. And now I'm going to start. That's how I got into tokenization. I'm like, I'm going to stop using a bank account, but then I'm going to explore all of these ways of using tokenization to get rid of third parties in other areas outside of just money. And I'm like, oh, so this is great. And then all of a sudden, the other people that were the most effective at that strategy were being targeted by the government. So this is how I ended up here. So I just keep on following this. And so what appears, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that there is a push for technocracy. We're at the late stages of it. And this is why we're talking to Chris here today, because Chris was a critical person providing a solution, a way out of this. And that's why he was targeted. That's why Stephen Nerioff was targeted. That's why Roger Ian, all of these guys were targeted. And again, the pattern is always the same. Hired lawyers, got opinion letters. It tried to engage in advance with the regulator to get an approval, which they didn't get. They wouldn't give you well, no, just continue doing what you're doing, right? And then trap set. So there's something deliberate, clearly deliberate here, and it is all in the realm of blocking peer-to-peer exchange, whether it's of money or securities or anything else. That is the threat.
Yeah.
So understand.
Well, is control of money and credit one of the central planks of the Communist Manifesto?
Yep,
it's in there somewhere. I think I read it.
So this is happening. So so when Chris tries to tokenize securities, it's a national security threat. But now DTCC tries to do it, and hey, what's
and you get a no action letter.
You get a no action letter. Let's do this. It's patriotism. Let's do this for America. We need to lead the way in this stuff, right? And so now we have the great taking, which can be facilitated by the Clarity Act. This is what's happening. This is why it's important to get Chris's story out and all of the other people that have been targeted. But not only that, we have to do whatever we can to help in these cases, but we also have to not let these actions have a chilling effect on voluntary exchange. That's been another point that I've been trying to make, because they target the people that are the most effective, hoping and believing, which it often works, that other people are going to look at this and say, oh, I'm going to stop doing that. I mean, here in New Hampshire, we were leading the way with crypto adoption and more crypto ATMs. And, I was going to restaurants and shops that were taking Bitcoin directly in 2012. That's dropped off. Right. It's had a chilling effect, and we can't let that happen. And so, so now is the time to elevate this.
Yeah. For my part, now that a lot of the legal maneuvering and posturing is done, we're really looking at production orders and then a trial, and that's all that's left ahead on this case. But then if we can't force them to settle out of court, then they're going to just appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So it'll be another 3-4 years on top of the 7 years that I've already put into this. And that's just, you're fighting people who print money. And yeah, that tactic, just for them to just drag it out as long as possible, abuse the process of law, subvert the process of law, obstruction, cheating, you name it. They're going to engage in that for as long as they possibly can, because that's the strategy. But, hey, at least in Canada, it's a loser pays legal system. So not only do you have to pay the judgment, but you got to pay all of my court, everything I'm out of pocket suing you for. So bring it on. Bring it on.
Thank you for doing this. It takes a lot of obviously courage and a lot of resources and commitment to do this. I know this is not easy. This has got to be
it's
a real strength.
I'm working like hell. I'm still, I still have all my financial credentials. Nobody stripped me of that, and I still know what I know and how to do. I still have all my skills. I'm a great financial advisor and executive, so I have clients. And they pay me well, and thank God for that. Otherwise, I would not be able to be carrying this lawsuit. But I have opened up a GoFundMe page. Actually, you'll find it on that equibitlawsuit.com website. So if you are inclined and to maybe help me carry the load, it's there.
Yeah, let me. Just gonna pop this up again, but it's equibitlawsuit.com, and let me share.
EQUIBIT.
Yep. Oh, hold on one sec. So yeah, definitely check that out, and I will start including that in my show introductions as well, and I will put that up on the website as well, and encourage you to do that. I like to make, I don't know if you heard at the beginning, I started creating AI songs First for Roger Ver, like this is back in I don't even remember the year now, 24. And then so now I've really spent a lot of time on it, and so I've created like 20 music videos and everything else. But it's a very powerful way to communicate some of these messages. In fact, when we end the show, I'll play the most recent one, which is one on Ian Freeman. So I will try to put one together for this case as well. Because sometimes these things, go viral and get 100,000 plus views, and some people hate AI music and others don't. But for the ones that do, it's actually a pretty effective way to tell some of these stories and get it across in a succinct way. So I'll endeavor to figure out how to tell that story as well. But yeah, I've got the website up. And I do encourage everyone to take a look at the site, and again, share this information. I'm going to continue to provide updates on this as it goes. I don't know. It's this show. My podcast tends to go long, but I tend to open it up for Q&A. You certainly don't have to stay for that. And often the Q&A goes off into all kinds of bizarre areas. Because I don't really. I've never had to kick anyone off.
I'm happy to take some questions from the audience before signing off if you want to do that.
Yeah, let me do that. And I'm trying to get, if I can, Dan O'Neill, who's the guy, he's the brain trust, he's the guy behind Enemies of the State, came up with the idea in 2024 and is pushing it again this year. I'm trying to get him to jump on now, and I'll bring Ray back. I think Ray, I sent a link with I think he might have thought this was the link to the actual stream. So I don't even know if he intended to come on and do Q&A. So Ray, I see you're still there. I've got you, backstage. If you do want to come up, if your intention was to jump in and chat, certainly happy to have you on board as well. I mean, what's happening to Ray is, it's tragic. And the thing is
shocking.
It's shocking, and Trump said the war on crypto was over. So it's one thing. You might be able to do some mental gymnastics and convince yourself that he's just not aware of these other cases, which is.
I mean, for Mexican federal police to respond to the request of the United States with such enthusiasm I've never seen anything like it.
No, I've never seen anything like it either. It was really jarring. And actually, at Mineratopia, Ray was supposed to speak right before me, and that the last one, he kind of joined me on stage at the end of my talk. So I was looking forward to kind of collaborating. We're also, I believe, on a panel together. And then when it turns out he switched to go earlier, and then he wasn't even there. I'm like, where's Ray? And I'm stunned by the fact that this is going on in 2026. It just doesn't make sense. But let me see. Let me share the link here. All right. All right, Ray, if you're there, I've popped you on the stage. If not, I understand. I'll remove that. Let me scroll up here and see if we have any questions specifically. If you have any questions specifically for Chris, please let me know. A lot of these comments seem related to other things. Elon Musk, some other things here. If we stop minting coinage, they will bid up the price of all metals. No, let's see. Digital currency tokenization, stable coins equals modern day slavery. Yep, that checks out. All right. Well, we'll see.
Stable coins there will be no central bank digital currency. I don't think there's going to be a tokenized Federal Reserve issued digital dollar. I think what's going to happen is the Fed will license banks to issue digital dollars. It'll be kind of like the way the gold standard used to be, where you would deposit actual gold coins into a bank and then you would get a bank note that from that private institution. So like, in Canada or even the United States, you can find these old banknotes that were issued by private banks, and they're very fancy pieces of paper. They look a lot like the dollar bills you see today or in yesteryear, but it's kind of a fallback to that old gold standard system.
Well, yeah, except it's not gold; they're treasuries.
Yeah.
And what's happened? So I'm actually working on a book tentatively called "The Creature from Epstein's Island." But what I'm talking about with this is that you have Tether, which was the largest stablecoin, and you have Howard Lutnick coming in before even engaging in politics. He was never a Republican. He actually was a big donor to Hillary Clinton. Invest $600 million in Tether in exchange for the contract to manage all of the treasuries for Tether, which of course Tether wasn't required to be backed by treasuries. And there's a lot of dispute over whether Tether was actually backed by much of anything at all. Gets into the administration as the chair of the transition committee, actually tried to become the treasury secretary after having negotiated this deal. Didn't do that, ended up at Commerce, but then pushed the Genius Act. He is the single biggest beneficiary of the Genius Act. Every time you use Tether, he's making money off of the treasuries. But Trump will not allow Lutnick to outdo him. We now have USD1, and this is kind of an incredible story. You have Trump in the long list of crypto pardons. One of them is CZ from Binance. And so he pardons CZ, and then CZ goes out and raises $2 billion for Trump's World Liberty Financial. And then he's the one who actually created USD1, which is the stable coin for World Liberty Financial. He's the largest holder of it. And now Pakistan has bought $5 billion of it, and they're trying to use it for the technocratic reconstruction of Gaza. So, I mean, like we're actually witnessing a system. The difference is, when the Creature from Jekyll Island happened, it was kind of behind the scenes. It was a shadowy thing. They're doing this in front of us. They're holding press conferences at Davos. Hey, here's the reconstruction project for Gaza. Oracle, Palantir, blah, blah, blah. There's never been a time where it's that blatant, where war profiteering and the agenda where people actively in the administration are monetizing things while in office. It's just it's insane to witness.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to say, NATO is the militant wing of big oil. And it's true. If you look at NATO's major backers, it's all big energy companies from the United States and England. And yeah, so of course they're going to want US military in the Middle East because that's where their projects are. And it's just a way of getting a taxpayer to pay their security bill.
Yep. Well, now we have the Board of Peace that Trump is the chair of for life. And it has on the board, since we defeated the globalists, it has on the board Tony Blair, the president of the World Bank, the CEO of Apollo, which that organization is currently in a lawsuit related to things involving Epstein. So, we replaced the globalist with the globalist, but because it's got a different brand, people are celebrating the victory. And it's something that, somehow they're going to outdo the UN and outdo the WEF and outdo the NATO.
Let me tell you a little something about the Board of Peace. So I don't know how this happened, but I found their X page before there was any public announcement of the existence of this thing called the Board of Peace. It just floated in. I don't know how, but the algorithm just decided to suggest this channel to me. And I click over to it and I'm like, the hell is the Board of Peace? And I look at it. There's only 3 posts at this point on the X channel for the Board of Peace and over 170,000 followers. How is that possible? Like, folks, X is a circus show. I mean, like these agencies will have Elon create backdated accounts followed by tens or hundreds of thousands of bots. it's all a scam, folks. Anytime you see a channel that has a huge following, like hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, like guaranteed 99% of that are just bots. And even, you know, they used to not backdate them. You would find a channel that had been, that, you know, you go in, you look at it and it says, oh, registered like 2 months ago, and there's 300,000 followers on it already. And okay, that's obviously fake, but now they're backdating these channels, and they're backdating them years and years and years in some cases. And I'm just seeing this play out in real time on my computer screen. And like, I don't have social media accounts in my own name anymore. I only have a couple of anonymous accounts that I engage through on X, basically just X, because that's sort of the deep state prize acquisition at this point. But it's just, it's become so easy for me at this point to just spot these fake channels, because they always follow the exact same kinds of behavior patterns. And if you see a viral post, take a sentence out of that post and then open up X's advanced search, plop that sentence into the field, search this exact phrase. And I guarantee you, more often than not, you will find hundreds of other channels posting that exact same message verbatim.
Yep.
None of this is real, folks. All these viral trends are all fake. They're all fake.
They are. And in fact, there's a service called Influenceables, which was started by Trump's former campaign manager from the last go around. And this is a service that, you know, it's against the terms of service of X, but what they do is they basically work with a bunch of influencers to coordinate sponsored posts that don't have the indication on them that they're sponsored posts. And so I know there was a big deal when I think RFK was talking about banning food stamps for the use of food stamps with sugary drinks. And then all of a sudden, these influencers, who, by the way, are just recent influencers, who are people that actually know nothing about, like, it's unclear how or why they're influencers. They're not smart. They don't have domain expertise. But all of a sudden, we've got some guy named Gunther Eagleman, who nobody knows who he is, but he's got 1 million followers, and he's one of the ones. And so yeah, you can see, just as you described, you can see here 15 people saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. It is all fake. It is all coordinated. Most of it's paid. And this was the thing for me with the Clarity Act and the Genius Act, which was to realize, because I'm like, wow, am I missing something here? Why are people rooting for this surveillance bill? And it turns out the reality is no one knows about it. It's not that people are against it or for it. Most people have no idea it exists, but the stuff that's out there is all fake support. And that's pretty much all of social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like that Mossad operative that got interviewed by CNN. You know, we're a global production company, and we create the stage and we hire the actors, and you know, so every big event was, you got to understand, it was planned years in advance. Everybody you're looking at is actors on both sides of the issue. And this is all a great big production that they've been doing. They've gotten very good at it over the last 100 years, but it's reaching the point now where I think the people, they're tired of putting it on. They just want the teeth to come out. They just want to run the world, with their violence and control systems on full display. It's the Frank Zappa quote. You know, the music is over and the curtains are going up, and we're going to see that there's a brick wall behind the stage, and we're stuck.
Yep.
And this is that moment.
Yep, this is that moment, and that's that's on display with this war. I mean, it's amazing that, with all this technology and everybody with phones, we have less actual information about what's going on in the Middle East, as well as with Ukraine or Russia. Nobody has any idea somehow of anything.
Yeah. That's the info war strategy, is just flood the airwaves with so much alternative and competing viewpoints that nobody knows what to think about anything.
Yep. And mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the situation with Iran is just that, you know, he ran on no wars in the Middle East and then bombed Iran last year and then said we've dismantled their program. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we're going in and invading again where there's no threat. This doesn't even meet the threat of the fake Colin Powell thing in front of the UN with Iraq. It doesn't even meet that standard. And then everything gets shut down. And so then all of a sudden, the fact that people were buying the ceasefire to me was amazing. Like I clearly the markets are manipulated. Like how anybody would fall for this. It's like a daily cycle. Friday, we're going to announce the bombings. And then Monday morning, we're going to announce peace, even though nobody's negotiated anything with anybody. Mm-hmm. And here we are. And so people are now on the side. Like it's just, it's wag the dog too in real time. So, yeah. Well,
just keep your eyes on Nancy Pelosi's portfolio and trade accordingly, I guess.
I'd rather see Howard Lutnick's portfolio. I think he puts Nancy Pelosi to shame. Well, I'm not getting. Usually, I get several. I'm wondering now if I'm because I'm talking to you. If we're being suppressed here, because I would usually expect to have somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people on right now, and usually we would have more people in the chat. And so I think I might be catching your some of your suppression here because normally we would have more vibrant participation. I mean, we still have 1,200, but I would have expected some more Q&A, and there are definitely some people, Dan O'Neill from Enemies of the State, that I wanted to have on, and some others. So but we'll certainly follow up. And again, it probably doesn't make sense for you to travel here, but if you want to do a recording, would love to get this message amplified at the Enemies of the State event.
Certainly. Well, I will look into physically being there. I most of my days are spent right here in this room on the computer, so I'm looking for excuses to get out of the house.
Oh, well, okay, that would be great. I mean, actually, would love to have you there in person. That would be absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, we'll see if I got any warrants out by unlawful detention in the U.S.
Yeah, well, hopefully not. But if there's going to be one event where it would be not in their best interest to arrest you, this would be it, because we're gonna try to get this amplified. Like I said, with anywhere from 1 to 3 million people through the people that have agreed to co-host the live stream. So I'm actually hoping that, plus the live event and everything else, this is actually going to be probably the biggest platform so far for all of these Enemies of the State. So it'll be great to have you there and help get this out.
Well, Canada is in a real public relations disaster with the rest of the world at the moment. I mean, Mark Carney's doing exactly what I said he would do, and he's basically presiding over the bankruptcy of a nation. That's his job. He's just going to carve up the country and sell it off to the creditors piece by piece, and then parachute out with whatever he's going to get out of this. But the whole discussion that I see kind of carrying out with 51st State or Alberta separatism, and so all of these conversations that have been kind of fringe conversations for the last 20 years about Canada are really taking center stage, and I know that is making a lot of people in the Canadian government really, really, really nervous and upset, because of course they all know if the US wants to take Canada, there is nothing anybody in that country is going to be able to do about it, military or otherwise. So if we add my story and about what the government of Canada has been doing to me, like they're going to be North Korea after this. Like nobody's ever going to want to have anything to do with Canada again.
Yeah, I mean, it's already teetering on the edge. Yeah, Carney's there to bring the MAID program to the economy.
And I mean, like Canada, folks. Canada has had a love affair with eugenics for a long time. The national hero of Canada is the same guy who rolled out the national healthcare system. His name is Tommy Douglas. And this guy's master's thesis, which you can download from, it's still there on McMaster University. It's called Problems of the Subnormal Family, and it's a eugenics manifesto. It's it's a plan to genocide all of the undesirables in the country. And that was his master's thesis. And this is the country's national hero, folks. They idolize this man. And he wanted to introduce national health care because he saw that as the way of implementing his eugenics program, which was to euthanize people who were mentally ill or not contributing to the economy to the degree that he thought that they should. And now what are they trying to extend MAID, government euthanasia, to? The mentally ill, people who can't work very much, or people who are just feeling a little sad. And when if you're anything other than tip-top shape, ready to go down to work the next day singing "Everything is Awesome," you're on a fast track to a lethal injection, as far as Canada is concerned, because you're not being a good tax slave anymore. So your net present value is no longer positive; it's a negative, and so we're going to get rid of you because now you look like a liability to our government actuaries here. So, welcome to Eugenics 2.0, Canada.
Yep, the first chapter of my book, The Final Countdown, which was about technocracy and trying to help onboard people to crypto and exit the system. The first chapter is this fiction story, but I incorporate elements into the fiction story, things that existed at the time. So there's a MAID program component. There's some of the social credit systems from China. So it's like the first chapter is this horrible dystopian thing, and then the second chapter is, hey, surprise, everything in the thing that you thought was fiction already exists in some point in the world. It's in some place in the world right now. And I talk about the MAID program. And when I go back and I read what I was writing about the MAID program in 2023 versus where it's gone now, it is an absolute tragedy what's happened. I mean, everything that you described, I mean, it's gotten to the point now where it's like you can almost get this on demand without approval. I mean, they've removed the friction, they've removed the gatekeeping. But even at the time, and there are all kinds of YouTube videos on this. I mean, there was somebody there that was in their early 20s and couldn't find a girlfriend. Or there's one that I talk about, the quadriplegic who or paraplegic who won the paraplegic Olympics or whatever, but she wanted and she got her injuries in the military, and she requested a wheelchair ramp, and the response back was, no, sorry, we can't give you a wheelchair ramp. Would you like to have the MAID program instead? I mean, it's just and that was
the way they're presenting it to people is just the most tone deaf and insensitive way you could think of. And it's like, how are these even human beings at this point? How can you sit there and talk to a person calmly, collectively, and completely frankly and seriously? Oh, yeah, you had a bad day? Well, let me help you kill yourself.
Yep.
Like, how is that? I mean, like, isn't this supposed to, aren't we supposed to, isn't one of the values, the stated values, kindness and empathy, and everybody's got a mental illness that we all need to pull together and help everybody get through. No, not in Canada. It's like, oh, you're somewhere less than 100%. Well, you can kill yourself.
Yep. Yeah, and they have commercials with all kinds of neon colors, and it looks like it's a spa.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it's so nice and beautiful and wonderful, offing yourself. And then we're gonna and before you're even dead, we're gonna promise your organs to other people.
Yep.
So I mean, it's a population reduction program as well as an organ harvesting program.
Well, apparently they've got good propaganda because the numbers are up.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the demographics of the program is also shocking. I mean, like over 95% of the people who get euthanized are all, white Canadians, the very same Canadians who Justin Trudeau said, we're going to get rid of people like you because these, old stock Canadians, we don't want you anymore in the country.
Yep.
So we're going to get rid of you. And I mean, like, okay, well, maybe is this a case where just white people really are just, they look out at the world and they see how it just, you look at the world hates us. We're all evil. We've destroyed everything. And, oh, I'm so depressed because of that. I'm just going to kill myself. And I mean, it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, again, they started this thing really ramped up during COVID. And I remember watching some of the videos where people were talking about the fact that rents had gone up so much during COVID in Toronto that this was their only way out because they literally couldn't afford housing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, talk about problem, reaction, solution. There you go. So I don't know. My sense is that what I've been trying to say is the Clarity Act. This is the final piece. Whatever it is that is going to trigger it, they need the Clarity Act that's the trigger for will own nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And because they built the tech. I mean, it's not like the tech that they're using is breathtaking, right? They're not atomic swaps. It's not hard to do a centralized version of this.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got their version of the tech ready, which your version of it was far superior, what, a decade ago?
Almost, yeah.
But now they just need this legal piece. And then what I try to describe to people is, because some people look at this and they'll say, hey, I don't have crypto or I don't care about crypto. This doesn't affect me. And I'm like, do you have a 401k? Do you have a stock portfolio? You won't, this isn't about having a crypto wallet. If your broker is using this, if this is what is the infrastructure underneath what you are directly affected by it. And it's hard to communicate that because people are far removed from understanding the existing system, let alone what tokenization would mean in the way that they're doing it under the hood. So
yeah, it's tokenization. I mean, it's an esoteric concept, but it comes down to something really simple. It's just, you're just making a digital tradable representation of something.
Yep, exactly. And a digital representation of it now. And the question is that digital representation is something that you have in your own custody, or is it something somebody else can program, track, and censor? And that's the battleground.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that was, I think, the idea behind national wallets. I think there was some country that was trying to do this, and they were trying to make cryptocurrency wallets illegal unless it was the government registered cryptocurrency wallet. So then now the government, I don't know necessarily, I didn't look into it deeply enough to know if it was the government's private keys and you just got to use the wallet, or if all of your public addresses, the wallet was constantly telling the government, yes, these addresses that I'm generating belong to this person. But in either case, there would be an identity associated with your Bitcoin addresses. So the whole pseudonymity of Bitcoin, this government was trying to just wipe it out by saying you can only use the government approved Bitcoin wallet.
Yep. Yeah. And you can expect, you can expect more of that. There's, I've gone into I'm going to do another write-up because they obviously keep on changing as they're moving the goalposts on Clarity, but maybe a top 10 facts that people should know about what the real implications of these bills are from a surveillance perspective and what it means broadly. Because I'll tell you, I've tried to see, is there somebody to debate about the Genius Act or the Clarity Act? And this is where it turns out there isn't anybody to debate. Even if you go online and somebody puts in a positive comment, you find out they're bots because you try to engage with it and there's zero response ever.
Yeah, or slogans.
Or there's slogans, and then you go click on the profile, and it's like, okay, this is a lobbyist for this company, or this is a lawyer for that. Like, there's never been. I have not found an individual that is not being paid by the side pushing the legislation that knows enough about it to even engage in a conversation or defend it. It just doesn't happen. No one's ever, I've had many podcasts, no one's ever refuted any of the points. It's crazy. But the thing that I found fascinating is we launched this war in Iran and everything, and we are in the middle of this government shutdown. And yet, what is the government focused on every day? Scott Bessent. Well, we've got to push. We've got to get clarity done. Trump, we've got to get clarity done. Why is it so urgent to get this bill done around the tokenization of assets when the world is blowing up around us and we can't even keep the government open? But boy, we better get the Clarity Act done. This is why you got to focus on what they're doing in the middle of all of the distractions, because what it is that they're actually doing, that's the source of the problem, and that's the threat that you should be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the cattle have too much stuff. They're getting ideas about freedom and having their own property and living off grid and having some sort of financial or energy independence, not at a national level, but at an individual level. And now we really can't threaten them. So they're just going to kibosh that whole thing.
They're going to try. But we still got time, and who knows? There's an opening, and again, thank you for what you're doing, because you're the only one that I'm aware of that's on the offense. So this is actually refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my big points years ago when I was first trying to push my story out. Is like, I'm the only person on the offensive here. Like, every single one of these sort of tragic stories always ends up with the innocent person usually going to jail or having their life destroyed in ways they can't recover from. But I recovered, and now I'm on the offensive, and I'm winning all by myself, which is pretty good. Imagine what I could do with 10,000 people behind me helping me.
Yep. Well, I wonder if there's something, I don't know if it's a petition or something else that we can do to help aggregate more support and keep people.
Yeah, I think it's just going to have to. I mean, Canada has become such a closed country. Like, you can't even see Canadian news on Facebook. the way Canada has kind of gotten the world to basically censor it from the information economy. It really is like a communist nation at this point. Like, news isn't getting out, and world news is not getting in. So they've really kind of contained Canadians in this little bubble of weird, passive-aggressive, narcissistic, faux patriotism, where we all hate Trump and Trump is the devil. And meanwhile, we're all getting rug pulled by Mark Carney and the liberals, and the lines between parties are all breaking down. And you've got conservatives who last week were lambasting the liberals are now crossing the floor to join the liberals so that they have a majority government to cram through every bad piece of legislation they ever dreamed of. So, like, the country is just collapsing into chaos, but they've erected this great information wall around them so that like they can't see how fast the country is collapsing. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, overcoming the wall of national censorship. But I think once we do, and once it starts organically getting talked about within Canada, that's when things will really start to happen, in terms of the government finally coming to the table and trying to negotiate a settlement. Because, yeah, if that noise gets out of hand, then things are going to get really difficult for whatever it is that they're trying to do. And there'll probably be all kinds of people starting to file lawsuits of their own based off of the precedents that have been set already in my lawsuit.
Yep. Well, good. That's a good thing. Let's hope that happens, and we'll do everything that we can here. And again, I'm surprised some of these people haven't popped in, but I guess it's probably getting a little late. But
I haven't seen a CSIS officer in the chat telling everybody, "Oh, this guy's a fraud," and blah 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 blah. Just
no, none of that. No opposition.
I guess they've given up on that angle. It's a little hard to back that up with anything.
Yeah, exactly. So that they don't use the truth. Again, they use court tactics and they use suppression. That's the thing that is just, I don't know. As much as I know government is not working in our best interest, and you know how corrupt it is. Just when you sit through one of these sentencing hearings and see just the lack of regard for the truth. It's all about the prosecution getting a win, and then ironically, building up a win record so that they can leave the government and then become defense counsel and charge outrageous sums on the other side. I mean, this is like it's a horrible game because it's completely disconnected from the truth and it's disconnected from law. But it's hard to get the average person to understand that. There are several layers that you're trying to unpack for them. But hopefully we can do it. I mean, because sadly, we have enough cases now of different people with different experiences where it's not even – none of these are the same judge. None of these are the same jurisdiction. These aren't even the same country. This is what's interesting about this. And it did occur to me as well. I mean, I haven't followed what's going on with Kim.com in his case, but I mean, when you're talking about Five Eyes, there's one example of Five Eyes in action clearly with his scenario. And that's been going on for, I don't even know how many years now, like over a decade, I guess.
Yeah.
So crazy. Well, any final thoughts before we close it out?
No. I think I think we're coming up to 4 hours now, so this has been fun. So thanks again for having me on, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, and everyone, equibitlawsuit.com, and I look forward to reading this book and having a separate conversation about that. So maybe we can talk about that in Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the Enemies of the State event on May the 25th.
I hope to see you there.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to play the latest music video that I put together. You may appreciate this one. This one is Free Ian Freeman, but it has some of the other crypto prisoners in there as well. So with that said, we'll be back next Thursday at 6 p.m. And I believe, I'll have to check the calendar, it will be with the lawyers for Roman Sterlingoff. So with that, have a great night. Bye.
In the morning, Leverett Street, rifles in the hall, tank through the front door for a radio host in Keene. He fed the meters, saved the town, Robin Hood of Keene. 20 years behind the microphone, first voice to say the word Bitcoin. Build a church in New Hampshire, an orphanage in Uganda. Forbes call his town a crypto mecca. They call him a criminal. They sent an undercover fed who said he dealt in heroin. Said no, turned him away. The Fed bought it anyway and called it evidence. You can send your tanks at dawn, but the signal doesn't stop. And called it evidence. about the laundering. Not enough evidence. 96 months anyway. For laws written before Bitcoin existed. Keon Rodriguez, Christmas Eve. William Hill, 4 years. Roman Storm, retrial in the fall. Ray Youssef, $200. Sterlingoff, 12 years. Roger Ver, 50 million in a gag order. The war on crypto didn't end. It just changed presidents. Mr. President, you set Ross free. You said you'd end the war. Ian's been inside since 23. Bonnie says he teaches inmates how to read. She says Bitcoin is sacred to us. You freed one. Now free them all! What you do with your freedom is your business. 6 a.m. in Keene. The signal can't be stopped. The signal can't be stopped. Signal can't be stopped. In the morning.